Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. My Wife is Black Phoenix. Chapter 101. Ding. Congratulations to the host for the 10 consecutive draws, successfully drawn, from the Dragon Ball World item, Shondo X23. Is it fairy beans again? Take it, it's useless to give me fairy beans at this point. Liu Yan was speechless. Continued to look down. Ding. Congratulations to the host. Successfully draw rewards, from the animation, Qin Shiming Yu, item, Ban Ling Ji's wipe, purchase X1. Ding. Congratulations to the host. Successfully draw rewards, get the item from the TV series, Bright Sword, Italian Canon JXL. Ding. Congratulations to the host. Successfully draw rewards, get the item from the TV series, Motion Management Bureau, Amnesiac Gun X1. 5 consecutive draws have passed in one breath. Although what you get is not bad, but it is a useful one. This caused Liu Yan's heart to feel somewhat anxious. Fortunately, next, the 6th lottery draw was pretty good. Liu Yan, who had fallen to the bottom of his mood, was taken up again. Ding. Congratulations, the successful extraction comes from the League of Legends world, from the ultimate move of the Time Assassinite Time and Space Break. Skill description. After using this skill, the host will break the constraints of his advanced timeline, become unselectable, and go back to a more favorable point in time. He returns to the position a few seconds ago and heals these few within seconds, the injuries suffered. After completing the teleportation, the enemies near the teleportation location area will receive a huge amount of damage. Ike's big move. Another one that can reverse time. Liu Yan refreshed for a short time. Definitely, it's really just a short-term excitement. After that, his brows tightened again. It's not that Ike the Time Assassin's skills are not strong enough. It's the time that Ike's ultimate move can be reversed, there is a limit. Judging from his current situation, even if it is really used, it is estimated that the status quo will not be much better. In all likelihood, Dormammu's side was taken back. Rubbed to death in your hands. So this skill, the future that can be reversed, is also very limited. Thinking like this, Liu Yan lowered his head and sighed again. Right now, it can be said that with the idea of not giving up and not giving up, we have started another lottery. 9 consecutive draws in one breath. In addition to Ike's big move that burst out before, it can also play a little role. For other skills, the effect is minimal. It was on Liu Yan's side, when my heart was almost at the bottom, CGAE. One final touch. It's finally a miracle. With a bright golden light, it lit up in front of his eyes. The system prompts that sounded afterwards fell in Liu Yan's ears, almost like the sound of nature. To the extreme. Ding. Congratulations to the host. Luck has exploded, and the super skill from the world of the moon is successfully extracted. Straight Death Demon Eye. Skill. Remarks. A real causal weapon. It is really the ability to look directly at death. Those who have this ability can visually see cracks, general dark lines on the surface of most objects. These lines are called it's a dead line. As long as you follow these lines to attack, it will cause an indefensible and uncurable terrorist injury to the object. It was once considered to be the only ability in the legend. It is precisely because of the horror of ability that my elder sister said that as long as it is alive, even if it is a god, it will be killed for you. The voice of explanation fell. Liu Yan's face immediately burst into ecstasy. I really fell into ecstasy. The ability he most wants is here. Finally he did not live up to his European emperor blood. After 10 consecutive draws, he finally got the ability that could really hurt Dormammu. The mood was like for a moment, and I rode the roller coaster together, and immediately became proud again. Look up again, after exiting from the system space. First of all, Dormammu also sneered, and directly let out his bold words. For Xiaoyi. Next, I make you cry without tears. Because the time flow rate in the middle of the system and the outside world are not the same. So Liu Yan felt that he was in it, and it took a lot of time. In fact, for the outside world, it only takes 0.01 seconds. Not even a blink of an eye. It is precisely because of this. At this moment, Dormammu is still fighting Ancient One Magician. Suddenly hearing Liu Yan, who was desperate in the back, said such words, it was naturally stunned. After regaining consciousness, I didn't think much about it. Instead, she sneered, thinking that Liu Yan was crazy. I wanted to take this one more time and mock Lu Yan again. But the laughter hadn't come out yet, but it stopped abruptly. Because after following, a light blue brilliance suddenly lit up in Lu Yan's dark eyes. And accompanied by this brilliance, he actually felt an extremely terrifying aura from Lu Yan, a fragile earthling. The skill, Devil Eyes of Straight Death, is activated. Lu Yan's eyes were instantly covered by weird blue light. After opening my eyes again, the world around him has also undergone earth-shaking changes. As mentioned in the previous skill description, now he looked at the objects around the world, and there were some indescribable black lines above them. Knowing the skills, he didn't worry about what these black lines were. Instead, he directly pulled out the life court scepter at his waist and smashed it toward the dark matter prison in front of him. Noisy. Lei Guang flows away. Right now he hits with his stick, followed by a crisp sound. Originally, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break through the strong prison. It was actually fragile at this time, as paper paste. Can't stop the power of Lu Yan. There was not even a blink of an eye before and after. He unexpectedly escaped easily from the dark matter cage. Watching this scene, Ancient One Magician was slightly taken aback. As for the Dormammu next to him, he raised his head and couldn't help but startled roar and shouted loudly. "This is impossible. How can you break the defense so easily?" Dormammu was shocked. However, this shock seems to be far from over. Because of that, Lu Yan reactivated the skill Thousand-Handed Buddha and attacked Dormammu again. And this time, it was still a fierce attack along the direction of the black line given by the Straight Death Demon Eye. He did not understand what is called a causal weapon. However, now that the Devil Eye of Straight Death is really used, it makes him have some different understandings. In his opinion, this thing is more like a super bug finder. What is looking for is the weakness of the object. At this time, Lu Yan didn't intend to be just him. Strike forward. At the same time as the shot was taken, he yelled at the Ancient One Magician next to him, said, "Magician, follow me and attack the same position." Lu Yan opened his mouth and yelled at Ancient One Magician next to him. Although Ancient One Magician didn't know what happened to Lu Yan just that moment. But at this moment, like Dormammu, he felt his special. So now I heard the news, didn't ask much, and also didn't hesitation. But to shoot directly, he also summoned a group of thunderclouds with magic, and violently attacked Dormammu. The two attacked almost simultaneously. Actually speaking, Lu Yan's attack strength is a bit reluctant to cause a lot of damage to Dormammu. But his power is not good, and the energy from Ancient One Magician in the rear is much more terrifying. The two sides trembled before. In terms of strength alone, Ancient One Magician was only weaker than Dormammu. Now there is more Lu Yan's side, and the help of Demon Eye is dead. It can be said to be even more powerful. In an instant, the combat power has more than doubled. At this moment, this group of thunderclouds stormed down, accompanied by the sound of thunder from Zizi Lala. Even Dormammu himself didn't react. What was going on? It was almost a blink of an eye. The right arm that he wanted to block the offensive was actually the whole arm, all of which burst into pieces. And because of the characteristics of the Demon Eye of Death, this injury cannot be defended at all, nor can it be repaired. So at this moment, even if there is a large amount of dark matter rushing from behind, the wound still has not healed, and there are signs of recovery. Blood filled with magical power was constantly spilling from the fracture of Dormammu's right arm. Feeling the pain, and this weird effect, Dormammu couldn't help but let out a panic-stricken roar sound. "What the hell is it?" He said so, turning his head and looking straight on the boy in front of him. Obviously, he also knows. At this moment, the strange situation on his body was completely caused by Lu Yan alone. Although I don't understand how such a terrestrial person can achieve such a terrifying effect. But right now, I also confirmed in my heart that he was the real master of this matter. What did you do to me?" Dormammu yelled and continued to ask. Seeing this, Lu Yan sneered. There is no desire to explain to the guy in front of him. The villain died of a lot of talk, others don't understand. He, a guy who has watched online novels or TV series for many years, can he still know? The more you have the advantage at this time, the more you can't press against the opponent. The tiger fights the rabbit still needs full force, and that's it. Although he has the eyes of straight death, After all, the other party is also the Lord of the Dark World. God knows what means he has to save his life. So in order to be sure, Lu Yan gritted his teeth and said nothing at this time. Reached out his hand again, chose to move forward and hit it out with another attack. Behind him, in Ancient One Magician's heart, in fact, there was also a stormy sea. But looking up again, after seeing Lu Yan's attack here, he still honestly chose to follow. The two attacks are once again united. Boom. This time, the entire dark world seemed to be shocked by this thunder. Dormammu raised his head and heard roar again. Cool. Even if it is a life that goes back thousands of years, Ancient One Magician dares to pat her chest at this moment and say that this is definitely the most enjoyable matchup she has ever played so far. Lu Yan's attack position is simply Dormammu's deadly spot. Now accompanied by these two attacks lay down. Even if Dormammu is stacking up his defenses at the moment. But it is still useless. His left arm was once again chopped into animal powder. Large swaths of blood, at this moment, are like heavy rain, falling down the palace. ! Dormammu let out an angry roar in his mouth. Countless big stars broke into pieces behind him. It felt like annihilation, and the horror was extreme. But at this time, even if it enters into such a terrifying aura. But there is still no way to scare away Ancient One Magician and Lu Yan in front of them. Lu Yan even sneered and waved the court scepter around his waist again. Seeing this scene, it was Dormammu's heart, and it was unavoidable to pass a trace of horror. Turning his head again, he didn't say a word of cruelty. Instead, he tore the void directly and began to flee. You can't run without running, this time it's really a crisis of death. To be honest, he has fought Ancient One so many times before. There is no horror of the crisis that came this time. The brat in front of him, called Lu Yan, was terrifying evil in nature. It's just a pity that he wants to run anymore, but it's too late. Ancient One Magician had originally held him a killer life, and Lu Yan in front of him was even more fierce. The two sides joined hands and flanked, almost in the blink of an eye. The third attack and the fourth attack have already fallen one after another. Titicaca, titicaca. The loud noise was endless in the court. The body of Dormammu, who was originally as tall as a hill, began to shrink. One after another unhealable wounds appeared on his body like cracks. While making him painful, his heart became even more flustered. Turning his head again, looking at Lu Yan who was chasing after him, he also gritted his teeth. I know that if I don't pay a bitter price this time, I'm afraid I can't really leave safely. Hate whispered asshole. Turning his head turned out to be fierce, and several cosmic galaxies were originally controlled behind him, but they were directly exploded. But what surprised everyone at this time was, at the moment, this attack did not directly target Lu Yan and the two Ancient One Magician. On the contrary, it fell on the void above their heads. What does this mean? Empty. Lu Yan looked at this scene and was also taken aback. Immediately, I felt a terrifying suction coming from above my head. Just when the big star burst, the terrifying energy directly blasted out a small wormhole. After the astonishment, Lu Yan felt that he understood Dormammu's intention. Co-authoring this guy, did he deliberately make an impulse to contain them? Can't let him run away. Lu Yan gritted his teeth. Although he felt resentful, his body could not help but floated towards the wormhole. Ancient One Magician saw this in the back, and naturally immediately formed a magical barrier on all sides. Numerous duplications go to the front to block the other side's path. As for the main body, it was a flick of the magic whip in his hand, trying to pull Lu Yan back. But no one thought it would be at this point. Dormammu, who had fled in front of him, suddenly turned his head and swooped over again. With Lu Yan now, just crashed into the wormhole. The Dark Lord is the Dark Lord after all. In the Dark Years, the guy who killed endless years, the combat experience is too rich. Even when he was dying, he still maintained an absolute calm mind. Originally, Lu Yan thought that the other party was planning to use the wormhole to contain him, and that there was Ancient One Magician so that he could escape. But now when I saw Dormammu, he dashed towards him. He just wanted to understand the joints. Knowing that I thought all this was too simplistic. This guy, from the beginning, planned to use the wormhole to escape. Everything before is just a disguise. Are all the villains in Marvel so smart? Lu Yan has a big head, Thinking so, his figure has been captured by Dormammu again. Although he has the ability of the Eye of Death, his defense has not improved at all. Without the protection of Ancient One Magician, he can't really fight the opponent in close hands. Just now, Ancient One Magician saw this scene, and it was too late to rush to help. When her duplication catches up again, accompanied by Dormammu's laughter, Lu Yan and Dormammu's body have disappeared in the wormhole. Do not want. Ancient One Magician's surprised roar. At this time, the figure has rushed to the door of the wormhole. But unfortunately, it was still half a step slow in the end. The wormhole closes instantly. Looking at this scene, the expression on her face was extremely complicated for a while. As for the other side, feel the healing of the passage behind you. Dormammu, who had been chopped off so that only one head was left, raised his head and couldn't help laughing again. Ha ha ha, old nun, you think you have done everything, as everyone knows, it's still a miss. Dormammu was proud, but at the moment, I haven't been happy for long. He was interrupted again by the ridicule coming from his side. Dormammu lowered his head when he heard the news, and found that Lu Yan was looking at him at this time, with a sarcasm on his face. Are you mocking me? Do you know what your 003 situation is now, and you even mock me? Don't you think that the deity still has a head and can't kill you? Dormammu lowered his head, and his eyes were full of fierce light instantly. Late, you want to kill me that way? Why don't you just give me a good time now? Lu Yan didn't care. Dormammu looked at his reaction, but laughed again. With a cold mouth, he said, don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. I will let you suffer humiliation and die. Make you regret being born in this world. Even if Dormammu escapes at this time, he still has to take Lu Yan with him. Naturally, it is not because of love. It really hates this person to the extreme. He is the lord of a dark world. Today, I fell into such a field. To put it bluntly, 90% of the reason is Lu Yan. I hate him so that my teeth are itchy. It's the psychological state of Dormammu right now. Therefore, he will not forget to bring the other party when he is escaping. In order to find time in the future, to torture him slowly. Let him taste the cruel criminal law in this world. Otherwise, how can he express the bad breath in his heart? And all of this, in fact, there is no need for Dormammu to say more, Lu Yan already knows it in his heart. But why at this moment, he still dared to mock Dormammu, and did not have the consciousness of being a prisoner of the order? That's naturally because Lu Yan still has his whole cards in hand. Although the passage of the wormhole has been blocked. But Lu Yan's 10 consecutive draws this time, what he got is not only that he can see through people's weaknesses, devil eyes. It also has another whole card. That is from the League of Legends, Time Assassin Ike's ultimate Time and Space Break. At this time, he opened his mouth to Dormammu, and there was another burst of gunfire, after making a good mockery of him. Immediately there was no hesitation, and he directly used the Time Assassin's big move, and began to reverse time. Dormammu thought at first that Lu Yan's mouth was out of anger, and he was going crazy after falling into a dead end. So in the beginning, when talking to him, with some in his eyes, he looked at Joker's jokes. But after Lu Yan really performed the Time Assassin's ultimate move, he realized that something was wrong. Hastened to reach out to stop. It's a pity, how can he stop the reversal of time? At this moment, even if he is as strong as Dormammu, he can only watch Lu Yan's figure and disappear in front of him again. No, this is not true. This is not true. Dormammu, who had been hit many times before, was completely crazy at this moment. Roaring crazy in the wormhole passage. Definitely is true, so I said you were an idiot, a clever fool. Lu Yan sneered. Lu Yan, you will get retribution. Not only you, but also Ancient One. You play with time at will, and you will definitely be punished by time. Dormammu screamed. Lu Yan teased his mouth dismissively. You don't have to worry about it, bye-bye, idiot. Lu Yan beckoned, his figure was completely illusory. After sniffing, he returned directly to the place where everyone was fighting a few seconds ago. Ha ha ha, Ancient One, you didn't even see, Dormammu, that idiot, in the final stage, how wonderful the expression on his face is. Lu Yan laughed and talked to Ancient One Magician, Z. When he wanted to come, on his own side, and Dormammu entered the time wormhole. It only took less than half a minute. On Ancient One Magician, he should still be waiting for his return. But right now he turned his head and looked around, but he didn't find Ancient One's figure at all. This suddenly made him feel a little hairy. Then I looked around and looked at the surrounding situation. The smile on his face solidified instantly. The place, although it is still the place just now, the scenery on all sides has changed greatly. The galaxies that were shattered in the battle before, as well as the dark matter floating and sinking, have all disappeared. Here, it seems to have become a pure land where no one has set foot for a long time. What the hell is it? Couldn't you really let the crow mouth of Dormammu get right? Liu Yan frowned, saying so, involuntarily thinking of the words Dormammu said in the wormhole at the end. Will people who play with time end up being played with time? Liu Yan was flustered inexplicably. Raise your hand quickly, draw the portal, leave here, and return to Kamar-Taj again. If it is said that what existed in the heart before was just a bad premonition. After Liu Yan's figure descended on Kamar-Taj again, he just took a look and was sure. Premonition has completely become a reality. The timeline has indeed changed. Kamar-Taj at this time was completely different from what he had seen before. Inside, the magician who went to school had to become more than before he left. However, most of them were strange faces he had never seen before. Dormammu, wormhole. Liu Yan looked at this scene, bowed his head and couldn't help cursing in his own heart. After that, I felt a little flustered inexplicably. It's not that I worry about anything else, it's the piano. When he left, Chin was still asleep in the room. Didn't this make him leave without saying goodbye? If this is the case, then Chin, this girl, how sad. Hope, this time, I haven't disappeared for too long. Liu Yan muttered in his heart. With that said, he opened the portal instantly and arrived at Chin in his bedroom. Found here, after people have gone to the building for a long time. Hurriedly headed towards the Kamar-Taj main hall. As soon as he arrived at the gate of the temple, he was stopped by the strange magician. Stop, magician is adjusting your breath inside, you can't go in now. I'm looking for Ancient One in a hurry. Get out of the way and don't block the way. Liu Yan said hurriedly. Ancient One magician is adjusting his breath, and there is no one in sight at this juncture. Unfamiliar magician said coldly. At this moment, he raised his eyes and looked at Liu Yan's eyes, still with vigilance. You guy. Liu Yan, who was already anxious, raised his eyebrows when he heard him say this. I also feel a little bit angry in my heart. Speaking again, I wanted to say something. Never thought that the door that was originally closed at this time had already been opened. Roar sound from Ancient One magician. It was a step ahead, and it came out from the door. Are you Liu Yan? Great, Liu Yan, you are finally back. There was joy and excitement in the voice of speaking. When Liu Yan heard the news, he immediately raised his head and looked in front of him. After seeing Ancient One magician, walked out of the room. First it was a joy. But after that, the expression in his eyes was astonished and puzzled again, and it was enveloped. The reason for this reaction is not because of anything else. But the Ancient One magician at the moment, and his previous image, has changed greatly. Don't get me wrong, it's not that Liu Yan came out of the time wormhole, and Ancient One magician was replaced. It's the Ancient One magician right now. The appearance of the whole person is actually much older than before. You know, Ancient One magician has lived for endless years. But because of having absorbed dark energy before, it has always maintained a young appearance. It looks like a middle-aged woman at best. It is now that the situation has indeed changed drastically after coming out of the wormhole of time. The current Ancient One, but a woman in her early 30s at most in his impression, is going to be too old. You can even see obvious wrinkles between the eyebrows. He gave a kick in his heart, couldn't help but speak, and asked again, Magician, what happened? How long have I been away? On Liu Yan's side, he looked terrified. As for Ancient One magician, looking up at him at this time, the expression in his eyes was relieved and even more embarrassing. Hearing what he said, he took a long breath. But he didn't say it straight, instead he stretched out his hand and pointed inward, then followed and said. Come in and talk about it, it's a long story. Seeing this, Liu Yanjung nodded and walked into the room. At this moment, I entered but just took a seat, and Ancient One Magician didn't make any detours. After that, it came to his biggest concern. To Lu Yan frankly. It has been 10 years since you left. What, 10 years, how long is it? Lu Yan changed color again, although it was known that the time flow inside the wormhole was completely different from the outside. But now I really hear Ancient One Magician saying that he has disappeared for 10 years. Still can't help but feel a little unacceptable. The expression on his face also changed from green to red. Looking at him like this, Ancient One Magician was naturally curious. Can't help but ask again. What about you? How long has passed since you were entrapped by Dormammu, entered the wormhole of time, and returned again? It's less than half a minute, maybe only 10 seconds. Lu Yan replied. Listening to what he said, the expression on Ancient One Magician's face was immediately stiff. After regaining consciousness, he lowered his head and sighed again. I couldn't avoid sighing, saying, sure enough, those who play with time will eventually be played with time. Lu Yan, it seems that we have all received the corresponding price. Ancient One Magician, with a sigh on his face. How smart is Lu Yan? Upon hearing this, I immediately guessed something. After speaking, he heard the news again, said. Magician's current state of mind is also related to time. What happened on Earth during the time I disappeared into Impulse? Is it possible that besides Dormammu, there are other powerful enemies waiting for the opportunity to attack the Earth? Lu Yan frowned. At this time, his face was solemn. The reason for this speculation, except that it was because the Ancient One Magician he saw was far older than when he first saw it 10 years ago. There is another important reason. That is the Ancient One Magician at the moment, and the aura on his body is not as strong as it was 10 years ago. No longer, when he first met in the holy place in New York, that kind of horrible aura that could control everything, talk and laugh, could overwhelm the sky. This makes Lu Yan a little puzzled. After all, Dormammu and him were also trapped in the wormhole of time. The current Ancient One, really speaking. On the Earth, it should be Dugu who seeks defeat. How can it be so good? Personal strength still has a realm, but will not rise but fall. Lu Yan looked surprised. Seeing this, Ancient One bowed his head and coughed, without speaking. But right now, she didn't reply. A male voice suddenly came from outside the house, helping her answer this question. Magician, the reason for this is entirely for you, Lu Yan. Lu Yan turned around when he heard the words. The one who appeared behind him was also an old deceased Baron Mordor. Only 10 years later, Modu is far more mature than when he first met Lu Yan at Holy Place in New York. Walked in from outside at this moment. Looking at Lu Yan's gaze, there was no previous hostility. On the contrary, it also brought a deep sense of emotion. For me, as soon as Lu Yan heard this, the whole person naturally became energetic. The Ancient One Magician frowned at this. I wanted to organize Mordor in front of me and continue this topic. It's just that Mordor isn't obedient now. Instead, he opened his mouth and continued to the back. During the 10 years since you disappeared, Magician has never stopped looking for you, even by himself, going deep into the depths of the dark plane, trying to find your footprints. In the end, not only got nothing, but also because for a long time, I have endured the erosion of dark energy. The magic power has greatly diminished, and the whole human body has begun to continue to age. The magic is greatly reduced. Ancient One Magician, isn't it able to absorb the energy of the dark dimension to replenish itself? Why is the magic power greatly reduced at this time? Lu Yan is full of doubts. It's just that, in front of Baron Mordor, I no longer ask hello so carefully. After all, he didn't know whether Ancient One Magician had secretly practiced black magic and told others. So at the moment, the eyeballs gurgled and asked about other things, said. That won't hurt, right? Could it be that in the dark world, there are still people secretly working on Ancient One Magician? Lu Yan looked confused, but right now, as soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of a few people in front of them became serious again. Then I saw Baron Mordor gritted his teeth, and said again with hatred. This thing was not done by the plane of darkness, but the Kaecilius. Kaecilius. Lu Yan was shocked, and after returning to his senses, his face instantly became exciting. Subconsciously blurted out and said, no way, this guy has rebelled. Yes, indeed a betrayal. This guy not only switched to the dark camp and stole the banned book of Cagliostro, but also secretly shot Ancient One Magician and wounded her. It is absolutely hateful. Baron Mordor, although he was a little arrogant when he was young, his heart was not bad. I still respect Ancient One Magician very much. So at this moment, speaking of this, it is also very indignant. Seeing this, Liu Yan did not reply. But at the moment when he bowed his head, there was a stormy sea in his heart. Unexpectedly, I rushed into the space-time impulse, before and after disappeared for less than half a minute. Such a big change has taken place in the outside world. But if you think about it again, he can understand. After all, this guy Kaecilius was originally a man with an eye above the top and his desire for profit. People like him, regardless of Dormammu's troubles or not, will run contrary to Ancient One Magician. It's just that what makes him a little unacceptable. He actually seriously injured Ancient One Magician. When was Kaecilius so strong? Or is it that Ancient One Magician was really looking for itself and was consumed a lot of energy in the dark dimension? Liu Yan thought so, and felt a little lost for a while. It's hard to understand. The strange magician who had blocked him before, now stumbled and ran in from outside the house. At this time, he thumped and knelt on the ground. Towards Ancient One Magician, everyone else yelled again, saying, it's not good, magician. Kaecilius. That Kaecilius, with his followers, killed Kamar-Taj. What are you talking about? Kaecilius, that dared to come back. Hearing this news, Liu Yan hasn't responded much yet. The Baron Mordor, who was sitting on the ground cross-legged next to him, was instantly refreshed. At this time, the sword eyebrows were upside down, and the ground was cleared, and he stood up from the same place. He was murderous, and he obviously hated Kaecilius to the extreme. And heard him talking here. The strange magician who came over to tell the news stubbornly started talking again, said, yes, not only did I come back, but also brought a large number of helpers, threatening to smooth Kamar-Taj today and take away the supreme title of Ancient One Magician. Mordor Magician, what are we going to do now? Depriving Ancient One Magician of the supreme title, does he deserve it? I'm going to kill this fool directly. Ancient One Magician and Liu Yan, you guys are waiting here, wait for my good news. Baron Mordor said so, and then strode towards the door. Wait for Liu Yan to get back to his mind again. He and the strange magician had already passed through the portal and completely disappeared. Magician, can this Baron Modo work? Gu did not speak. Liu Yan was watching by the side, but couldn't help being a little worried, and asked again. After all, this guy Mordu, 10 years ago, was not a little bit behind Kaecilius. Ancient One Magician heard the news, and then said again. Don't worry, there is no old saying in Washa, saying that the scholars should be admired for 3 days. You have not come back for 10 years. Naturally, you can't look at Baron Mordor with your old eyes. The Kung Fu in the past few years, Modu has to work harder than anyone else. In terms of strength alone, he should not be much weaker than Kaecilius. Ah, isn't it? That's good. When Liu Yan heard what Ancient One Magician said, he naturally put his heart back in his stomach. I thought that this battle would really be as Ancient One Magician said, that he could easily win and force Kaecilius back. Then the eyes fell to the seat, and continued to talk to Ancient One Magician. There was no time for 5 minutes. Suddenly heard a bang. The whole world seemed to tremble. After the two of them pushed the door and walked out, they followed and saw it. Just before him, Baron Mo was angry and confident. At this moment, he was beaten directly on the ground, bleeding from the corners of his mouth, and the whole person looked embarrassed to the extreme. Opposite him, Kaecilius stood with his hand held down, and the corners of his mouth were even more cold and disdainful. He said again, at this level, would you dare to come out and stop me from acting? Mordor, do you really think that your own 3-legged cat's kung fu is enough to deal with me? It's naive. I told you a long time ago, at your level, you will never be able to catch up with me in your life. 10 years ago, you were not as good as me, and 10 years later, the same will be true. Kaecilius said, his chin raised slightly. The eyebrows are full of arrogance. Glancing at Baron Mordor on the ground, it was like looking at a dying dwarf ant. After a while, he said with joking, give you a chance to survive. Go help me persuade Ancient One Magician. As long as you can succeed, I will spare you today. Kaecilius opened his mouth sideways, his words somewhat threatening. When the Mordu man heard the news in front of him, he gritted his teeth and said with determination in his eyes. You dream, I tell you, I will never betray the teacher like you. You stupid idiot, haven't you noticed it? Ancient One is old and useless. It would be a waste of time to let her sit in the position of Sorcerer Supreme. One day she will abdicate, and then this position will be passed to who? Give you this idiot. Not for me, Kaecilius, her favorite big disciple. So right now, I am not rebellious. It just accelerated the process of becoming Sorcerer Supreme. So right now, Mordu, you blame me, but you really blame the wrong person. If you really want to blame someone, it should be weird. It was because of his greed for authority and his unwillingness to surrender the position of Sorcerer Supreme, Kamar-Taj had this catastrophe today. Quote. Kaecilius said, eyes full of smiles. Obviously, he himself really believed his rhetoric. Wow, shameless. For this kind of nonsense, Baron Mordor is naturally impossible to believe. At this time cursing low. Following that, moving in his direction, Roar took another mouthful of blood. Although the saliva only fell on Kaecilius' boots. But it also brought him a great sense of humiliation. Kaecilius raised his head again, his sword brows erected, and murderous intent finally came out of his eyes. Toast not to eat fine wine. Okay, this is your own death. After speaking, the right hand was raised, and the magic was surging, and it directly turned into a hot chain. He slapped directly at Baron Mordu. Looking at that posture, I was planning to cut Baron Mordo into two in public. Watching this scene, the magicians in the rear couldn't help but start roar. They want to help, but at this moment, they are all trapped by Kaecilius's men. It is really powerless. It's over. Is it possible that Mordu is really going to die here today? Some people have grief in their hearts. At this moment, Baron Mordor had a look of despair in his eyes. Even he himself thinks he must die today. Unexpectedly, at the very moment, suddenly an inexplicable suction came from behind him. Pulling him, he easily avoided the fatal blow from Kaecilius. Everyone was surprised. Immediately afterwards, I heard a cold snort, which suddenly rang in everyone's ears. Kaecilius, after all, he is your fellow junior. If you do this, don't you really have a conscience? The speaker was a somewhat old female voice. But right now, the one who dared to emerge at this time is naturally not a woman, and naturally it is not someone else, it is Ancient One. Everyone was overjoyed. As for Kaecilius, looking at the wounded Ancient One, he walked out of the room. At the fundus of my eyes, a touch of surprise first flashed. But then he turned his head and looked at the man who was holding her next to him. His brows frowned in an instant. A deep astonishment passed in the depths of his eyes. Although I haven't seen him for 10 years, it is naturally impossible to forget Lu Yan. Because of this, I saw Lu Yan suddenly appear. It was unavoidable, a little shocked. With something unbelievable, he said again, Lu Yan, it turned out to be, you are really alive. And you are still alive, come out of the dark dimension. Yeah, it's been a long time. I didn't expect that, Kaecilius, you are still good at it, and you are planning to deceive your master and destroy your ancestors. Lu Yan spoke lightly, and in his words, at this moment, he was not as excited as Baron Mordor. Don't get me wrong, it's not that he is not angry at what Kaecilius is doing right now. But at this time, he really didn't regard the other party as his opponent. No way, I just fought with Dormammu and saw him exploding in multi-universe. Let's look at the behavior of Kaecilius at the moment. It is not an exaggeration to say that you will really see children playing. It's basically a joke. So when I speak at this moment, the corners of my mouth are playful and seem extraordinarily calm. It's just that at the moment, his calmness seems to be misunderstood by Kaecilius's weakness. So at this moment, he snorted coldly, and said with some contempt on his face. Whether I deceived my master and annihilated my ancestors is not your turn. I haven't been back in 10 years, and now I'm back at this juncture. Lu Yan, I can't say whether you are lucky or unfortunate. Yes, just stand aside and don't get involved in this nosy. I read it for the sake of our fellow brothers. I can also open one eye to you. Let you go, otherwise, today, we will go to Wonkwon together with Ancient One Magician and this bunch of stupid woods, believe it or not. Kaecilius said coldly. At this time, the eyes were full of solemnity. At this time, when these words are said, they can no longer be said to be warnings. It's a complete threat. When the magicians heard the news, they all passed by with a desperate look. Among the people present, it is natural that not everyone does not know Lu Yan. But everyone thought about it. A magician who had been lost in the dark dimension and was abandoned for 10 years, returned again. No matter how talented it was back then. Today, it is definitely not possible to be Kaecilius's opponent. At this moment, those who have such an idea account for the vast majority. It is not an exaggeration to say that even Baron Mordo, who fell to the ground coughing up blood at the moment, had such an idea. Only Lu Yan heard the news at the moment, raised his head haha but laughed again. Looking at Kaecilius in front of him, instead of pleading, he was serious, and said again, 10 minutes to you, roll the betting for me to get out of here, otherwise, believe me, I will make you regret and come to Kamar-Taj. Bold, you presumptuous. Kaecilius didn't even speak when he said this. The group of magicians who he reached with his hands were staring, and they all roared at first. As for Kaecilius himself, he sneered even more at this time. Slowly opened his right hall. He did not speak, but the disdain in his eyes at this time was more than 1,000 words. At this moment, accompanied by dark magic surging. There was even black inflammation, which instantly enveloped the entire right arm. The meaning of killing is like the autumn wind, instantly sweeping the spot. Don't fight him. Lu Yan, hurry up, take Ancient One Magician, and leave here together. Seeing this, the fallen Baron Mordor was busy yelling. Go, I want to go now, it's too late. Kaecilius sneered. Finish saying this. He slapped his right hand down. Roar, endless black flames flooded. Seeing the wind at this time, it rose, as if a huge wave instantly submerged the figure of Lu Yan on the opposite side, including the house behind it. The black smoke that was tainted with the aura of the dark plane was really terrifying. Burning at the moment. However, in the blink of an eye, the original 2-story wooden building at the rear was burnt to fly ash. Seeing this scene, everyone felt a chill, which rushed from the heel to the forehead. It's over. Yes, Kamar-Taj today, I'm afraid it will really end here. The magician holy land that has been passed down for thousands of years, Kaecilius, they are really sinners. A crowd of magicians mourned roar more than ever. Kaecilius got up again, his gaze fell on Ancient One Magician who was standing not far away. Looking at her familiar face, there was a sneer on the corner of his mouth, and he said again. Master, now, are you still unwilling to catch it with your hands? No, I really thought that guy Lu Yan can break my black magic restriction this time, and walk out of this black flame innocently, right? This is it. Top black magic ban. Kaecilius looked proud. Seeing this, the opposite Ancient One Magician still didn't answer. Because just before she spoke, Lu Yan's voice has been heard from the black flame again. With some disdain, even a little lazy, he said again. Is this what top black magic you are talking about? It doesn't seem to be as strong as I thought. His voice is not loud. But at this moment, it fell in the ears of everyone present, but it was no less than a thunder. Especially Kaecilius. At this time, after hearing Lu Yan's words, the whole body was even more instantaneous. Huo Ran turned around and looked at He Yan again. Immediately after seeing the center of billowing black flame, a gap suddenly opened. Lu Yan just took steps. Slowly walked out of it. At this moment, the black hair danced with the wind. Holding a long stick, stubbornly stubborn in his lazy expression. The momentum is really like CGAE, God Chu came to the world. In an instant, there was no sound in the field. After a moment of astonishment, it was Kaecilius who was the first to recover. At this time, he raised his eyes again and looked at Lu Yan who was unscathed in front of him. A touch of shame passed immediately in his eyes. He cursed lowly. We must continue to do it. But he is fast here. Lu Yan's speed is obviously faster than him. Almost at the same time he was thinking about it. Lu Yan's feet have already split the portal. Appeared above Kaecilius' head. Raise your hand. Infusion of magic. The staff of the Court of Life instantly turned into a thunder whip, slamming it towards the top of Kaecilius's head. Asshole. When Kaecilius saw this, his pupils suddenly tightened. Obviously, he didn't expect Lu Yan to shoot so quickly at this time. While cursing low, start thinking immediately. Use magic to summon an earthen wall more than half a meter thick. She gave him shelter in it. I thought that such an earth wall could at least block Lu Yan's offensive, even for half a minute. However, I never thought about it. At this time, Lu Yan's eyes were full of blue light. Immediately under the activation of the magic eye. Sweep out directly with one stick. Kara said. The seemingly unbreakable soil, like paper, was swept into pieces in the blink of an eye. Immediately afterwards, it was hit with a stick again. Noisy. Wandering with Leg Wang. This time, Kaecilius, the whole person is really like a rag bag, he was swept away directly. After landing, I heard a series of explosions from around my body. There were more than 200 bones in his body, half of which were directly broken by Lu Yan's stick. After falling to the ground, I want to talk. But a mouthful of blood was like a blood arrow at this time. But it came out of this guy's mouth first. Distributed by the beetles. It looks more miserable than Baron Mordo just now. Grown-ups, help Lord Kaecilius. All the entourages around saw this change. Naturally, he wanted to stop Lu Yan. It's just a pity. The number of people in front of Lu Yan has never been enough. Then take another step. Plenty of fruit's ability to cast. 100 times the gravity, like a hill directly pressed down. Lu Yan doesn't have to do it himself. Then listen to a series of muffled sounds, resounding in the field. When he takes another step, the nearly 100 followers who had just been between him and Kaecilius had been directly shocked to death on the spot by him. Powerful, although returning after a 10-year absence. But on Lu Yan's side, he shot. But it revealed that everyone in Kamar-Taj was unpredictably powerful. Watching this scene, Baron Mordo and the magicians of Kamar-Taj were all stunned. As for Kaecilius, his eyes almost fell to the ground at this time. Looking at Lu Yan again, his gaze was even more dazed. Obviously, at this moment, I really don't understand. Why can Lu Yan be so powerful? This is already comparable to Ancient One back then, right? What did you learn when you went to the Dark Dimension? Why did you become so powerful? After the shock, Kaecilius was immediately filled with curiosity. So at this time, even with severe pain, can't help but speak, Lu Yan asked again in front of him. And looking at him, that inexplicable and horrified look. Lu Yan smiled again. It is naturally impossible to tell the other side the reason why his combat power has increased so much today. It's entirely because of the existence of the bug-level skill, Straight Death Demon Eye. This time it was just a mysterious smile. He leaned forward and patted his shoulder. He said with a little indifference. Want to know? You can save this question to hell and ask Death God carefully. Finished. Lu Yan did not hesitation either. A probe. He broke this guy's neck directly. What is it? In the past 10 years, Kaecilius, who disturbed Kamar-Taj's peace, died on the spot. Watching this scene, everyone present was in a daze for a while. A strong sense of unreality came to my heart. Baron Mordor, after getting up from the ground again, rubbing his eyes even more unexpectedly. I suspect that the scene just now is just my own illusion. Not true. After a long time, everyone returned to their senses. Inside the Kamar-Taj magician, which was previously suppressed so hard, there was a series of shocked roar sounds in an instant. Success. We really defeated Kaecilius's offense. This is awesome. Yeah, I can't believe it. Ancient One Magician hail. Lu Yan hail. In the crowd, there are Chinese who are also high roar up at this time. Lu Yan turned his head, looked at the faces with black hair and black eyes like him, and smiled cordially. After stepping forward, he took out a senior bean from the system space, and threw it into the hands of Baron Mordor, who had just gotten up from the ground. What is this, Lu Yan? Baron Mordor asked curiously. Lu Yan didn't say much, but directly said, don't talk nonsense, just eat it, you can recover from your injury immediately. Lu Yan said to Baron Mordo. Baron Mordor heard the news, although he was a little suspicious. But he still stuffed the fairy bean into his mouth. Immortal beans enter the abdomen. Immediately afterwards, I felt a warm current gushing from his stomach and flowing to the limbs. A shocking scene happened. It's exactly the same as Lu Yan said. The body that had been beaten all over by Kaecilius before. It was repaired at a terrifying speed visible to the naked eye. Even on the epidermis, some wounds appeared before. Healing started at this moment. And he didn't even leave any scars. This, my God, Lu Yan, how did you do this? Really feel this magical effect. Even if Baron Mordor was originally a magician, he is a little bit aphasia at the moment. As for the side, Kamar-Taj, who was originally exhilarating, is a magician. At this moment, he looked into Lu Yan's gaze again. It brings a deep respect. Obviously, everyone's thinking right now is the same as Kaecilius who just died. Right now, I feel that Lu Yan has disappeared for 10 years. It must have gone to an unknowable place from the dark dimension. Learned the secret of horror. Lu Yan smiled faintly at this. He who dislikes trouble, didn't explain much at this moment. Turning his head, he raised Ancient One Magician, found a quiet room again, and started to rest. As for the outside, Kaecilius has the funeral of his party. All were dealt with by Lu Yan, who was thrown to Baron Mordo, who had just recovered from his injury. At this moment, Lu Yan's behavior is similar to a big shopkeeper. None of the people present felt dissatisfied. Without him. It was the scene where Lu Yan turned the tide and saved everyone just now. Let everyone be broken for it. Many people even started to talk in private. Looking forward to the day when Lu Yan will replace Ancient One and become the new Sorcerer Supreme. Fortunately, Kaecilius was directly solved by Lu Yan's hands long before. Otherwise, I heard everyone say so at this time. I am afraid that I can be mad enough to vomit blood. He spent several years. What was unavailable came from the unanimous approval of everyone in Kamar-Taj. Right now, it was Lu Yan who had just returned to Earth. In less than half an hour. It's easy to get. This TM really complies with the old saying. Scream, shop around, people are more popular than dead man. Although everyone is talking privately outside. But with Lu Yan and Ancient One, their current strengths. There is almost no need to deliberately eavesdrop. The sound of the conversation was already verbatim, and it passed into their ears. Seeing this, Lu Yan looked a little embarrassed. As for Ancient One Magician, the corners of his mouth were smiling. He took the initiative to speak, and said again. Actually, I think the suggestions of those outside are pretty good. Lu Yan, how about it? Are you interested in taking the position of Sorcerer Supreme? Who is Sorcerer Supreme? You say me. Lu Yan reached out and pointed to his nose. Followed, without any hesitation. The head swayed immediately like a rattle. Waved his hand and said again, forget it, I don't want to be a Sorcerer Supreme. Oh, isn't it good to be the Sorcerer Supreme respected by all? Ancient One Magician asked. Seeing this, Lu Yan also got serious, and said again. It sounds really good, but it's a pity, Ancient One Magician, the position of Sorcerer Supreme you mentioned is not what I am after. Then what are you after? Hearing what he said, Ancient One naturally became more curious. When Lu Yan heard the news, he shook his head and gave his own reply without thinking about it. Definitely is a leisurely life of salted fish. Every day I get up, I don't have to worry about eating and drinking, my wife and children are hot, I can go wherever I want, no one can care about me, and I don't have to be responsible to anyone. I open my eyes all day long. Thinking about how to play today, this kind of life is interesting. But the location of Sorcerer Supreme. Seeing this, Ancient One Magician would like to persuade a few more words. But Lu Yan watched, but immediately waved his hand, stopped her again, said. Okay, Magician, I have decided, so don't talk about me. In fact, at this moment, you are not the same. If I am not wrong, your current aging is not only due to the erosion of the dark plane, but also do you deliberately do it? No one was around anyway. Lu Yan directly pierced the biggest secret of Ancient One Magician. Seeing this, Ancient One was stunned. He didn't deny it. On the contrary, he nodded calmly and said with emotion. When you live for a long time, you will find that eternal life is not a blessing, but the greatest torture for a person. Lu Yan, I am a little tired. Lu Yan was stunned when he heard the news. To be honest, I just heard Ancient One Magician say so. The first reaction in my heart was to feel that the other party was pretending to be forced. But after I really sank my heart. After thinking about it carefully, I discovered that what Ancient One Magician just said is not unreasonable. Indeed, if you don't have any friends and you are alone for the sole purpose of responsibility, you will have unlimited eternal life and reincarnation. This really seems to be a great torture. Anyway, Lu Yan sighed, thinking about it is going to be boring. For hundreds of years, it may be okay, but thousands of years. Monitor the dark plane every day, beware of their attacks and attacks. Lu Yan thinks about it, it's all a while. Because of this, when I lower my head, I nodded with deep conviction. It can be considered to agree with the views of Ancient One Magician. After speaking again, there was no too much persuasion of 0 and 7. After all, this matter, how to do it, to put it bluntly, is the freedom of Ancient One Magician. So when he turned his head, he skipped this topic and asked what he was most concerned about right now. That is the whereabouts of Phoenix. It's been 10 years, and he doesn't know where Phoenix is now. Whether he still missed him at this time, or was full of resentment. Is there a tendency for Phoenix Force in the body to explode again? He didn't know anything about these things. It is precisely because of this. He is very ambitious just now. At this time, he spoke, while asking questions to Ancient One Magician. All behaved a little anxiously. When Ancient One Magician heard the news, he laughed again. He stepped forward and took the initiative to pat Lu Yan on the shoulder, calmingly said. Don't worry, everything is the same as before, Chin, for so many years, still waiting for you, never change. As for the Phoenix Force in her body, it has not erupted for a long time, otherwise, I won't let her leave like this. Kamar-Taj. Oh, really, that's great, that Chin Gray is now, where is it? Lu Yan looked excited. Having said this, he opened his mouth and asked again. Upon hearing the news, Ancient One Magician glanced at him, but smiled again. The corner of his mouth said with playfulness, since Phoenix Force is completely controlled, it is natural to go home, otherwise, where else can I go? Go home. Lu Yan was shocked. Suddenly, his little shop in the corner of Hell's Kitchen popped up in his head. I have mixed feelings for a moment. No more nonsense. Get up and say goodbye directly to Ancient One Magician. After waved his hand to split the portal. Just enter it. He left Kamar-Taj directly. After a few years, I returned to the familiar street again. In 10 years, even everything around Hell's Kitchen has undergone huge amounts of changes. Many shops in his mind are closed. Now people are starting to use smartphones. Started watching movies online. The video store industry has long been declining. However, the video room on the corner of the street is still open. Even if no one patronizes. Doors and windows are still as clean as new. Lu Yan stood at the door. A lazy cat is basking in the sun in the corner. An old servant who has reached middle age is sweeping the floor with a broom. As for the hostess, she was busy with her back to the direction where they were at this time. Everything looks so peaceful. Lu Yan pushed the door in. The bell block hanging by the door started to jingle. The old servant raised his head and said habitually, if you want to rent a movie, go to the side to fill in the form first. Now the old movies are not easy to rent. When he reached the lips, he was stunned. However, the whole person just stood in place as if he had been given a fixation method. What's the matter, Lunyon, isn't that the annoying fellow Nick Fury, here again? The fiery red-haired piano, Gray, didn't look back. Holding a rag in his hand, he said while wiping the table. But for a long time, he didn't get a reply from Lu Yan, but it made him feel surprised. Take your eyes, she called twice in a row. Turning his head again, looking at the person coming, the whole body was also stunned for an instant. After a long time, he squatted again. Is Lu Yan you? I'm not dreaming. Phoenix looked incredulous. Lu Yan looked at it, and the expression in his eyes was also full of sorrow. Looking at this time, the childishness has faded. Chin Gray is full of mature girl temperament. I also had mixed feelings for a while. After a long while, he nodded and said, it's me, Jin, I'm back. The words are exported. The tears in Chin's eyes burst out instantly. The whole person plunged into Lu Yan's arms at once. Hugged tightly with him. When the golden wind and jade do meet, they win but countless people. The two embraced, as if time had fallen into eternity at this moment. After a long time, the two separated. After the mood settles for a while. Sitting on the sofa in my video room, I started to talk about everything that happened during the time I was away. After knowing that Liu Yan was fighting with Dormammu, he was only dragged into the wormhole of time by Dormammu and stayed for less than half a minute. All of Qin Gray were naturally shocked. After that, he opened his mouth and talked to Liu Yan about the changes in the outside world in the past 10 years. In these 10 years, although Mutant is still active around the world, however, the X-Men and Magneto have gradually withdrawn from the world stage. Retired from the public line of sight. Especially Magneto, this guy was after the last big fight with Charles. The whole person seems to have shaken hands with Charles and the others. Lived completely in seclusion. As for where to live in seclusion, even Qin Gray didn't tell me. However, the X-Men and Mutant, although, have gradually withdrawn from the stage of history. But war is still the theme of this world at this stage. Stark's military industry is developing in full swing. It is the best omen. Liu Yan listened, his heart moved slightly. Through a few words from Qin Gray, it can be regarded as a general idea at what stage the advanced timeline is. If he guessed correctly, it is probably the time of the Marvel movie, Iron Man 1. But right now, he doesn't have the intention to pay attention to whether Tony Duck has completed his transformation from a playboy to Tihanan. That's not right, Iron Man's metamorphosis. Compared with this, he pays more attention to the 0.4 meters in the past 10 years, Qingli's mental journey and her practical life. Hearing Liu Yan's question here, Qin smiled slightly, but the conversation turned around and talked about himself again. Compared with the excitement of the outside world, Qin Gray's life is a bit boring and single. In the past 10 years, apart from waiting for Liu Yan to return, he continued to train himself and increase his control of Phoenix Force in accordance with the method given by Ancient One Magician. So although she is not well known in the outside world at this moment, but with the control of Phoenix Force, it is getting higher and higher. Qin Gray's strength has become stronger and stronger. Apart from other things, it can be seen that there is almost no change in her current appearance from 10 years ago. The current piano is gray, not to mention that it is not old or dead like the Ancient One side. But it is estimated that there is no problem in living easily for 500 to 600 years. After knowing this, Liu Yan felt both happy and lucky here. Fortunately, only 10 years have passed since the outside world. If it is the past time, it will be longer. To be honest, he couldn't even imagine what the outside world would be like. Even when the time comes, Qin is still not old, still waiting for himself silently. But this kind of waiting, is it not an alternative torment? Thoughts flying. After a long time, Liu Yan turned his head again and looked at Qin's gaze, unable to help but feel guilty toward her feelings, said, "Thanks for you during my absence, Jin." Heard him say so. There was a smile on the surface of the piano, and he immediately shook his head and said again, "Between you and me, don't you think it's too strange to say this? Liu Yan, I just feel wrong to you." What is wrong? The wife waits for the husband who is traveling to return home. Isn't this what he should do? Qin Gray said solemnly. Liu Yan heard the news next. My heart even felt that there was a warm current surging through. Step forward and hug the other party actively. The two of them looked so tired and crooked, they looked a little embarrassed when they looked at the side. After a light cough, I also knew that the two sides had not met again for a long time. I was standing here at this time, like a high-watt light bulb, which was really an eye-catcher. So took the initiative to put down the battalion in his hands. He said to Qin Gray again, "It's getting late, Miss Qin, then I'll go out to work." Qin is not the silly girl back then. Naturally understand the meaning of the eye. His cheeks flushed immediately. Following the hum, he also nodded. On the contrary, Liu Yan was somewhat surprised when he heard the news. He glanced at the bullseye next to him, and asked, "Late, go to work. Bullseye, do you still have another job outside?" When the bullseye heard the news, he was a little nervous. Then he hurriedly replied, Yes, I accepted Nick Fury's invitation before, and I took a part in S.H.I.E.L.D. Wait, where did you say, S.H.I.E.L.D.? Liu Yan was also stared when he heard the news. I thought that in the past 10 years, I couldn't bear to be lonely and went back to my old career. Whoever thought, went around in a circle. Instead, I went to S.H.I.E.L.D. and got involved with Nick Fury again. This braised egg, the skill of digging the wall, is too strong. Is it possible that Lan Shang graduated from top students? The corners of Lu Yan's mouth twitched slightly. At this time, Nick Fury began to rant in his heart frantically. It's just a pity that all of this, everyone next to him, is ignorant. At this moment, he looked down at him in a thoughtful manner. I thought he was dissatisfied with the part-time job like Bullseye. I was so scared that cold sweat poured out of my eyes. Obviously as a gold medal killer. At the moment S.H.I.E.L.D. is a high-level agent. But in front of Lu Yan, it was like a little chicken, shivering. This pitiful appearance, let alone others. Even with the Phoenix next to him, he couldn't see it. After a light cough, hurrying forward, he also stretched out his hand to hold Lu Yan, for the bullseye, pleaded, and said. Don't be like that, Lu Yan, actually, there is not much time to go to S.H.I.E.L.D. Basically, it is Carlson's side. When he encounters some unsolvable tasks, he will ask the bullseye for a favor. Moreover, it did not delay his work in the video studio. In the past 10 years, he has basically taken care of everything up and down in the store. To be honest, our video room has been in a stalemate for more than 10 years and is still open, thanks to the eyes. Hearing what Chin said, Lu Yan naturally recovered from his deep thoughts. Looking up again, looking at the anxious appearance of the two people in front of him, he couldn't help but shook his head with a smile. Reached for the piano, raised nose. Then he smiled again. What a silly girl, when did I say that to blame him? Don't worry, I understand the hard work and dedication of the past 10 years. As Lu Yan said, he glanced at the lightning sign on the head of the next wheel. Just said that, he really didn't lie. But from the heart. Because of Fiend's Covenant, the relationship between Lu Yan and the bullseye is actually quite special. It is not a simple master-servant relationship. But the whole soul of the bullseye, there are parts, is controlled by Lu Yan. Under these circumstances, Lu Yan only needs to check the memory of Lunyan to know if Chin Gray lied just now. Naturally, I have seen the hard work of these years. It was the same as Chin said just now. He is really a very qualified butler. Lu Yan is too late to be grateful for his help over the past 10 years. Naturally impossible, you will blame something when you come up. Under the dominance of this kind of thinking. So when he stepped forward, he also reached out and took the initiative to pat the shoulder of the bullseye. Encourage him. Support his own decision. He even spoke and offered to say that as long as the bullseye is willing, he can put the other party, leave the video room, and become a free man completely. But right now, I heard him say so. The bullseye, who had just let go of his heart, was immediately excited again. Shaking his head like a rattle, he immediately spoke, and refused Lu Yan's request without thinking. Watching him persist, Lu Yan nodded, and said nothing more. Waved his hand again, and was about to let this guy go. Let him report to S.H.I.E.L.D. But whoever thought? It's on this juncture. There was a sudden, piercing, rubbing sound of tires from outside the house. Everyone spoke again. I saw a black Big Ben stopped. Car door opened. A familiar marinated egg, now at the entrance of the video room. Director, Nick Fury, looking at people coming from Lu Yan's eyes, they were all startled. He obviously didn't expect that he would appear here. Lu Yan naturally knew that on his trip, when he returned from Kamar-Taj, the news that he reappeared near the Hell's Kitchen could not be concealed from the relevant senior officials of S.H.I.E.L.D. But how long has passed since then? The other party came to the door so quickly. This still surprised Lu Yan. Now that S.H.I.E.L.D. has so many eyes and ears near the Hell's Kitchen. The energy is so huge. Lu Yan looked surprised. I was thinking about it. The door of the video room was pushed open again. Nick Fury laughed loudly this time and walked in from the door. Looking at Lu Yan, he said excitedly. Very good. It's been so long, Lu Yan, you fellow, you are back. Nick Fury laughed. Although he had received the news long before he came here. But now that's the real end, after seeing Lu Yan himself. To be honest, I can't help feeling very pleasantly surprised. It's been 10 years. How many decades can life be? He is a high-level agent and has become the chief of S.H.I.E.L.D. The hair is boiled, can be regarded as waiting until Lu Yan returned. This is really exciting news. Thinking of this, Nick Fury strode in outside the door, and then came up. He was very familiar with Lu Yan and came in a bear hug. Seeing him so passionate, it makes Lu Yan somewhat embarrassed. Reluctantly, I could only swallow the words that had originally come to my lips and were ready to ask questions. Then he pushed Nick Fury, and said again in anger. Okay, don't give me this set, I can warn you, I won't get involved. Nick Fury was stunned at this. Immediately looking up, haha laughed again. With some emotion. 10 years, your fellow is still the same, no change at all. Nonsense, for you, it's 10 years, for me, it's just a blink of an eye, definitely nothing has changed. Lu Yan muttered out of breath. When these words were spoken, Nick Fury's interest in front of him was naturally aroused immediately. His eyes lit up instantly. Then Lu Yan looked in front of him, with some curiosity, he asked again and said. Huh, Lu Yan, what do you mean by this? Why did I listen? I'm a little confused. What do you mean? It means literally. Lu Yan rolled his eyes out of anger. Followed by everyone's unanimous curious gaze. It's about putting yourself into the wormhole of time and telling it again. Chin Gray, they have all heard about this just now, but they didn't feel much shocked. It was the first time I heard Nick Fury next to him. Naturally, he was surprised at this time. After listening, I couldn't help but sigh with emotion and said. Sure enough, this universe is full of too many unknown dangers, even time wormholes. Lu Yan, sometimes, I am really worried. You said that one day, the multi-universe proposed by scientists, the concept is also true. At that time, if aliens invade the Earth again, what can we do? Nick Fury sighed with emotion. Lu Yan listened and looked at his expression, but it became weird. After a clear cough, is not angry, said to him again. I said you can do it, I just came back, don't you just want to take me to your shield? Nick Fury smiled awkwardly and waved his hand hurriedly. Don't get me wrong, I didn't mean that. I just said this and I was totally sentimental. But Lu Yan, I said it has been 10 years, can you not resist a shield so much? How about, are you interested? Just like the bullseye, join us at shield. Don't get me wrong, it won't take up too much of your free time, at best. Just give it a name. If you are interested, I have a plan for many years, called revenge. The more Nick Fury said later, the more exciting his expression on his face became. Lu Yan is also very big. The heart is worthy of the MLM leader, who can fool so many super powerful guys who have joined the Women's Federation. If you solicit, you just open your mouth. It's almost becoming an occupational disease. But right now, let's just let Nick Fury talk about it. Lu Yan shook his head here, and only said one word, that is, no. He wouldn't join the Women's Federation to become a working emperor and protect world peace. Let others do this kind of work. Thinking so, Lu Yan was stern, and at this time it was more than just verbal rejection of Nick Fury's solicitation. Even warned him, next time I say this, then come to the video store. Seeing Lu Yan's tough attitude, Nick Fury sighed inwardly. Secretly complained about the character of Lu Yan. It's the same as 10 years ago, no change at all. Then I could only nodded with a wry smile. It's such a promise to this matter. Following that, the subject immediately changed. He said to everyone, it is a rare blessing that my old friends have not come back for so many years today. Let's do it tonight. I invite you to have a meal together and gather together for a meal, even if it is for Lu Yan to pick up the dust on your side, how? Quote. Hey, so kind, wouldn't you be paying attention again, wanting to fool me into joining the meeting? Lu Yan said, his face was suspicious. And listening to him say that, in front of Nick Fury's face, he immediately squeezed a smile that was uglier than bitter, and said again. Don't be like this, Lu Yan, look at what you say. It's really just gathering, not to lie to you. How about it, are you interested in another one? Nick Fury said, his face was also expectant at this time. See Lu Yan here, hesitation a bit, holding the idea of not eating white and not eating. Still agreed to the other party's request. It's arranged at 7 o'clock tonight, goodbye. After saying this, he knew the question very well, and left the video room with his eyes. Leave the remaining time to Lu Yan and Phoenix, and have been to the two-person world. Talent just left. Lu Yan just pulled down the shutter door and closed the video room. Phoenix plunged into Lu Yan's arms all at once. Hugged him. Looking at him, take the initiative and affectionately. I miss you, Lu Yan. I really think, it seems. Phoenix changed his shyness. Take the initiative to confess. Let Lu Yan have some surprises at first. But turning around and thinking about it, it's clear. That was a whole decade. Wait 10 years. This emotion was squeezed together and suddenly came in and out. Can it not be scary? Chapter 111. All this, although Lu Yan concealed it well when he rushed to the Nick Fury banquet. But it was inevitable that the old driver was bitten and found the clues. The S.H.I.E.L.D. director, who has always been serious, but at this time, he really came over with an ambiguous expression and reminded Lu Yan to be restrained. Take care. Just these words. The truth reached Lu Yan's ears. In exchange, it was a very dissatisfied stare. Shin said, "You old boy, you have such a wide control. I also hope that I will join S.H.I.E.L.D. I tell you, it's out of play." This time, it was really a little drama, there was no more. Poor Nick Fury, don't know, just because of his own words. Being an invisible really ruined Lu Yan's side and the possibility of joining S.H.I.E.L.D. See you poorly. If you really know this. He didn't dare to talk too much at this time. It can only be said that sometimes invisible mouth cannons, it's just so cheating. Lu Yan hurt his mouth, and after sitting down, he didn't chat with Nick Fury. 10 minutes later. Phil Coulson, this guy is long overdue. After apologizing to the few people in front of him with a look of guilt. Everyone is here now. The banquet officially began. Although I don't like Nick Fury, this guy smiles at himself, that old drivers know. But at this dinner, Lu Yan thinks he should praise the other party. On Nick Fury's side, he really has lost his mind. Not to mention anything else, taking into account the identity of the Chinese on Lu Yan's side. This time to celebrate his return, I specially invited people to find the master who came from Chongqing. Had a meal for Lu Yan, authentic Chongqing hot pot. The taste of that hot pot is really not covered. Anyway, it brought back the memories of Lu Yan's last life. He feasted while eating. At the same time, there were other thoughts in my mind. That is to transform his small video store in Hell's Kitchen and transform him into an old Sichuan and Chongqing-style hot pot restaurant. The reason for thinking so. On the one hand, it is because originally, at this stage, the video store is outdated. The flow of people is basically pitiful. As for the other reason, it is even simpler. People are always nostalgic. Lu Yan was regarded as being touched by this meal, which brought back memories of his hometown. CGAE, hot pot, barbecue, spicy, Xuanchuanxiang must have. Who said that people in New York can't eat authentic Greater Chinese cuisine? If you can't eat it, make it yourself. Lu Yan thought so. It is also a look of excitement. Anyway, he is not short of money here. The video hall is still a Chinese food city. To him, it makes no difference. Lu Yan became more excited as he thought about it. What he eats is feasting. But the few people in front of Nick Fury are going to look embarrassed. Westerners are used to sandwiches and steaks. These guys really couldn't bear this kind of heavy taste suddenly. The stewed eggs were so spicy that they were sweating. Phil Coulson next to him is even more miserable. A good white man. Even the spicy sweet potato is about to be turned into sweet potato. Basically, eating 2 pieces of meat requires a big mouthful of water. So back and forth, the whole person is almost into a bucket. Lu Yan also shook his head again and again. Fortunately, compared with them, Phoenix's situation is much better. I don't know if it is because of following Lu Yan and eating Chinese food all the time. Anyway, there is a relatively high acceptance for hot pot, which is a heavy-tasting delicacy. During the period, he even took the initiative to open a preserved egg and tasted it. Praise it for its superb taste. Then he asked the waiter for another plate, and took the initiative to share it with everyone. Watching Phoenix and Lu Yan eat so much with gusto. Next to Nick Fury is naturally curious. But after I really waited for the black preserved egg to be placed in front of me, the cold sweat on my head was unsatisfactory and flowed down again. Whatever I said, I refused to really eat this stuff in my mouth. Lu Yan, who looked like a pie, was also full of laughter. Shin said, who would have thought of the rain of bullets in Marvel, the famous S.H.I.E.L.D. director would not frown. In the end, he would succumb to the yinny of a small preserved egg. I thought to myself, holding the preserved egg, I'm going to persuade this guy a few more words. Never thought. It's on this juncture. Nick Fury's phone rang suddenly. Nick Fury took it with a smile. The expression on his face suddenly became serious. Okay, I get it. This time, our shield will definitely attach great importance to it. Nick Fury spoke again and again, assuring towards the other end of the phone. Look at him doing pie. Everyone was naturally curious. So right now, he just hung up the phone. With Phil Coulson still in his eyes, he couldn't help but speak, and he asked again and said, "What's the matter, Nick Fury? I see your face, how can it be so good, suddenly become so serious?" Nick Fury sighed after hearing the news. But he didn't answer directly. But his eyes suddenly fell on the opposite side, Lu Yan, who was feasting. Then he said solemnly, "Lu Yan, I'm afraid you really need your help in this matter." Lu Yan originally watched him answer the phone, and felt a little hairy in his heart. Hearing that he said so now, and then lowered his head, he couldn't help but cursed himself. Shin said, as expected, this guy is a troublesome complex. There is always nothing good to be with him. Definitely, think about it. Right now, I really heard the other party saying this to me. After cold snort. After Lu Yan snorted coldly, he said again. Don't come to this set, even if you really want me to help, you have to tell me what happened, right? I can't just say nothing, just let me get started. It's the son of a deceased person, who had some problems and was kidnapped. Nick Fury replied. As soon as Lu Yan heard it, his brows were immediately scratched. Subconsciously reported a name and said, "Don't tell me, the son of the ancients in your mouth is called Tony Stark." The words came out, and even the opposite Nick Fury was shocked. After returning to God, he didn't hide anything. But a very open nod, yes, it is the Tony Tank, one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D., the son of Howard Stark. I just received urgent news that this guy, who seems to be kidnapped by a gang of gangsters in the Middle East, has been missing for more than 48 hours. The entire Stark group is currently in a state of no leader, and it is a mess. Lu Yan, I want to ask you to take a trip to the Middle East and save Tony Stark, can you? Let me save people. Run to the Middle East, so far. When Lu Yan heard this, he immediately shook his head like a rattle. I didn't get angry and refused, saying, no, you have to save yourself. In fact, I want to say that Tony Stark is very shrewd, and he has the same virtue as his father. Even if he is kidnapped this time, he will be surprised in the end. There is no danger, and you get out of trouble yourself, your worry at this time is completely unnecessary. Lu Yan is also not good at telling everyone about the plot of Iron Man 1. This kind of remarks can only be used to comfort everyone. It's just a pity that none of the people present believed Lu Yan's remarks. Think about it, the current Tony Stark, although an incomparable genius, and a wealth of wealth. But from this guy, there is not the slightest feeling that his father used to be for the country and the people. I can't even see the shadow of the superhero who is, mortal body, like a god, in the future. It is precisely because of this. Everyone was right now. Lu Yan just said that Tony Stark was completely able to save himself, and felt scornful. When Nick Fury heard the news, his face became even more ugly. At this time, Lu Yan was completely shirking responsibility. He was busy and persuaded. Hope he can help. After all, this kind of thing, for Lu Yan, is nothing more than a simple effort. As far as his strength can be a hard steel alien fleet. Let alone a gang of thugs. Even if it is 10 times more, it is impossible to think about Lu Yan. So now, from this perspective, Lu Yan is really the best person to perform this rescue mission. Lu Yan frowned immediately after hearing the news. At this moment, he opened his mouth, thinking of rejecting his condition. After all, this principle of self-harm is not very consistent. It was really unexpected. It's at this juncture. In front of Lu Yan, another prompt popped up from the system. The God-level selection system is activated again. Beep. Congratulations to the host, successfully activated the God-level choice from Tony Stark. 1. You said it's a matter of raising your hand. That's good, then I will really raise my hand. He promised to help Nick Fury, but he only promised to help open the portal and send their people to the Middle East. He would not really end up and search for Tony Stark himself. After all, my time is precious. It hasn't been long since I just returned home, and I am expecting Hechin to be warmth-saving, and I don't have the time to waste it with them. Choose to complete. Reward character template Wandering Magician Rise proficiency increased by 5%. 2. If you don't listen or listen, the 8th chanting. Resolutely reject the request from Nick Fury and stick to his own principles. Anyway, the guy Tony has the protagonist halo and can't die. The choice is complete, and the reward is a box of sugar-free Chuo. Even if it is a fat house, it must be a healthy fat house. 3. Okay, kindness is difficult, but Nick Fury, you must remember that you owe me a favor. Take you to the reasons for this side, and help Shield here, rescue Tony Stark from the Middle East, and make a good relationship with this future Marvel brother. Choose to complete. Reward items from the world of Shenxia, Zuyan Dan X5. A series of options, accompanied by system prompts, appeared in front of Lu Yan again. Lu Yan looked at him, feeling a little lost for a while. After scanning the 3 options in an instant, according to the old rules, it is the first time to eliminate the option with the lowest reward. From this point of view, the second item is definitely not selectable. There was only the first one left in front of him right now, and there was a third option. In fact, in terms of his salted fish personality, the first option is undoubtedly the most suitable for him. As long as you raise your hand and open a portal, you can easily complete the options. You can get a 5% Wandering Magician proficiency reward without worrying about the following things. It can be said to be lying down to make money, not too comfortable. Compared with this, the third option is a lot more troublesome. It is going to the Middle East again, saving people, and making good relations. It's complicated, but right now, after he saw the reward of the third choice, it was hesitation. There was no reason for him, but the third choice was given here. The reward of the Zonyan pill really hit the pain point in his heart. After returning from the wormhole of time this time, although Phoenix didn't say it clearly, Lu Yan could feel it. On the Chin side, he still cared very much about the fact that he was 10 years older than Lu Yan out of thin air. After all, for women, age is really a big lethal weapon. Although she is very well kept, she also has a long life. But I am always worried that Lu Yan will show his senility first. Lu Yan has been trying to make up for this. Originally, he intends to go to Ancient One afterwards, to come to her for immortality and help Chin Gray to keep her face unchanged. But right now, after seeing this Zonyan pill, he suddenly realized that he seemed to have a better choice. That is to take back this Zuyan Dan for Chin to take. That is simply getting it right once and for all, and there is no need to practice any more magic techniques to absorb the energy of the dark world, which is so troublesome. It's definitely, provided that this thing really works. Thinking of this, he immediately evoked the system in his mind, and wanted to know what the specific effect of this thing was. Zuyan Dan, if this Dan is a gimmick, or really worthy of the name. The answer given by the system also made him happy. Beep. Zuyan pill, as the name suggests, is a pill that can keep people young forever. After the host or anyone taking this pill, the age will remain at this stage and will not age again until death. Until death, it means that if I can be 500 years old, then when the 500 years old end my life, it will be as long as I am now. Yes. The system replied decisively. Lu Yan grinned again when he heard this. The heart said, what else is there for hesitation? Choose the third item directly. What a salted fish life, it's definitely not as important as Chin Gray. Our bottom line is that there is no bottom line. Lu Yan thought so. After returning to mind, it was finally under the expectant gaze of Nick Fury and others. Very reluctantly, agreed to this condition. Definitely. At this time, I was holding the idea of being able to kill a meal. Lu Yan will not agree to help Nick Fury for no reason. Instead, he spoke up again and slaughtered Nick Fury. After blackmailing several meals, there is still a big favor. Only then nodded with satisfaction. Just turning his head and looking at Chin's gaze again, he felt a little guilty again. Thinking, not long after I just returned, I will go to the Middle East. I always feel a little sorry for Chin. When Chin saw this, he laughed again. Right now, he took the initiative to stretch out his hand and hooked Lu Yan's palm again. He smiled and said, it's okay, Lu Yan, we can definitely go together. Where did you go? The Middle East. Liu Yan was shocked, but after returning to his senses, his eyes lit up again. Suddenly I felt that this was really a good idea. Yes, he doesn't seem to have to be separated from Phoenix. Before Dormammu, there was also a time when facing the Kree warship. That was because he was worried that Phoenix would be hurt during the battle, so he didn't bring the opponent. But now, what he faced was just a bunch of ordinary robbers. Even if you have a gun in your hand, how can it cause much harm to him? In fact, don't talk about him. Phoenix alone can solve the opponent easily. Don't underestimate it, you have completely controlled the strength of Phoenix Forces Grey. This can be seen from the previous movie Dark Phoenix. Phoenix in a complete outbreak. This is the current Liu Yan, without using straight death demon eyes. It may not necessarily be the opponent's opponent. Thinking of this, 010, he raised his head again, met Chin's expectant gaze, and finally smiled and nodded. I agree to this matter. Haha, great, this is great. Chin Gray saw this by the side and jumped up excitedly. It feels like a child right now. Looking at her like this, Liu Yan was naturally very happy for it. Only Nick Fury was the only one who looked at him and couldn't help frowning again. After a clear cough, he carefully reminded Liu Yan in front of him of the importance of this matter. No way, it's really impossible not to remind. Watching Liu Yan's actions right now. It's really more like traveling than saving people. Who can not worry about this? And for his worries. Liu Yan himself, on the other hand, hurt Cancer's mouth inadvertently. At this time, naturally, Nick Fury's reminder was not taken to heart. After satiated, stretched, and even more annoyed, he pulled Phoenix up from behind the dining table. Going to go shopping at night? What are you talking about, Liu Yan? Right now, Tony Stark is still in the Middle East waiting for your rescue. At this moment, if you don't hurry to the Middle East, you still want to go shopping. Nick Fury's voice suddenly increased several times. Finally couldn't keep worrying anymore. Liu Yan looked at him indignant and anxious. But he rolled his eyes irritably, and said again. What is the urgency? Even if you want to save people, don't you have to prepare related equipment and materials? Otherwise, you can't let me go to the Middle East and buy it on the spot, right? Oh, you are going to buy this. That's okay. What kind of weapons do you want? My shield can provide them as soon as possible. Where do I need to go to the streets to buy them? Nick Fury secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He was busy speaking, patted his chest, which was a guarantee. I really thought that Liu Yan was going to the streets to buy guns. But waited for the evening. After Nick Fury got the so-called purchase list from Liu Yan's hands. But he couldn't help but ran away again. Sunglasses, sunscreen clothing, sunscreen lotion, windbreaker. This fool really took this trip to the Middle East as a tourist. Nick Fury watched this scene, his teeth tickled with anger. I really want to point to the nose and scold Liu Yan. But no way, he dare not, although he has become the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. But obviously, for Liu Yan, this guy still has a psychological shadow. So I can only be alone, sulking. Looking at his appearance, Phil Coulson shook his head helplessly beside him. But right now, there is no time to comfort Nick Fury. Because of this, he has to help Liu Yan purchase body sunscreen. Although Nick Fury still has S.H.I.E.L.D., he did this to Liu Yan. I felt very dissatisfied, but the efficiency of S.H.I.E.L.D. is still very efficient. That night, before 8 o'clock, all the things Liu Yan needed had been purchased. It was placed in front of Liu Yan's video store. Seeing this, Liu Yan nodded very satisfied. Early the next morning, I only put on 2 sets of sunscreen clothes on the beach, holding a glass of coconut juice in his hand. It was so easy to travel through the portal and went to the Middle East. On their side, they are chic. Tony Stark, this guy felt like he was in an unprecedented trough in his life right now. He, Tony Stark, the proud man of heaven. He was kidnapped in the Middle East inexplicably. And wait until I wake up from a coma again. There is not only a weird steel device in the position of his heart. Moreover, the Middle Eastern gangster pointed a gun to his head and asked him to make weapons for the opponent. Otherwise, kill yourself, madman, a bunch of lunatics. Asshole, Tony Stark, it's not that I didn't think about resisting. But these guys are desperados who really kill people without blinking. When Tony resisted, he was tortured miserably. This also really made me feel the feeling of struggling on the verge of death. That kind of feeling made Tony Stark terrified, but at the same time he really understood the truth about not being able to head on with these guys. So, he thought of the plan that had been left in his mind before, about making the world's strongest individual combat mech in history. A wild and daring escape plan. In his head, it has come into being. He is determined to create this terrifying set of mechas in the name of making weapons for this gang of bandits. Kill these fools. But if he really wants to do this, he still needs a helper. So at this time, wait until the culprits have left. He was in the room and explained his plan to his companion Ethan. This is the guy who saved his life and his best partner here. So right now, he didn't have any concealment, and when he returned to the room, he immediately walked towards Ethan. No matter what, they will kill us. The injuries I have now, with this device, can survive at most for a week. So this must be the most critical weeks, isn't it, Mr. Stark? Ethan did not give up. Looking at Tony this time, he said so. Yes, Ethan, we can't give up. Whether we can leave alive, it depends on this week. Tony turned his head and looked at Ethan's eyes, also excited. In this bandit den, he and Ethan became the best partners in the shortest time. At this time, he stepped forward and took the initiative to shake hands with Ethan. Tony was planning to talk in detail about himself, the manufacturing plan of the first individual weapon. No one thought of it. It's at this juncture. Behind him, a bright portal suddenly opened. Behind the door, a pair of beautiful men and women wearing beach pants appeared in front of them very leisurely. Looking at him, he said with some playfulness, "I finally met Mr. Tony Stark." Liu Yan raised his eyes and looked at the messy hair in front of him, a young man who looked like a refugee. For a moment, I was full of emotions. Who would have thought that this guy would be able to resist Thanos in the end and save all mankind? No, it should be to save the entire universe. For a moment, he was full of emotions in his heart. Opposite Tony Stark and Ethan, they were all blinded. The words were spoken well, and suddenly two strange men and women fell from the sky, just like the characters in the legend. I'm afraid it will be very unacceptable for anyone to do this. The same is true for the two people in front of him. After a while, it was Tony who had passed away first. Looking at the man and woman in front of him, he asked again. What the hell is going on? Who are you and how come you are here? You mean me. My name is Liu Yan. The one next to me is my girlfriend named Chin Gray. As for why we are here, I am definitely here for you. Liu Yan replied. When Tony heard the news in front of him, he was stunned again. Reaching out, pointing to his face, with some disbelief, and said. Come for me. You mean you came to save me? Definitely, otherwise, why do you think I opened the portal from New York at? Did you come here to play? Liu Yan asked back. His words caught the attention of Ethan next to him. Wait, the portal, you mean that the portal you just opened can also go back to New York and return to Millie's sword? Ethan asked. Liu Yan didn't answer, but Phoenix nodded next to him, and took the conversation. Definitely, otherwise you think, why did we come here? But, impossible, it's unscientific. Ethan was completely blinded. Liu Yan smiled when he saw this. One more beckoned. The wrench that was still in Ethan's hand just flew into his hand. The corner of his mouth said with playfulness, Science. Sorry, I use magic. What science are you talking about? Magic. Ethan was stunned again. However, Tony's performance next to him was much better than him. As early as when he was young, because of his father, he was exposed to these secrets of the world much earlier than others, which is difficult for ordinary people to touch. It is precisely because of this. Right now, the acceptance of the magic in Liu Yan's mouth is naturally very high. Besides, it's on the bone right now. Obviously it is not time to discuss magic. Thinking so, Tony spoke again, rushing towards Liu Yan before asking again, saying. Then, can we go back through the magic you just said? It's the portal, go straight back to New York. Definitely yes. Liu Yan nodded. Seeing this, Tony Stark was naturally overjoyed. Busy said, great, then what are we waiting for, let's get started. What's the hurry? I've come here, so I just took you away. Isn't it shameless? Why, you have to kill all such vicious bandits. Liu Yan definitely said, but right now, I heard him say so. In front of Tony Stark and Ethan's face, it changed again in an instant. What, are you planning to do something with them at this time? Don't mess around. Yes, take us away first. These bandits are all thugs, they all have guns in their hands. Ethan spoke one after another, worried and persuaded. When these words were spoken, Phoenix's face at the moment could not help becoming a little weird. But at this moment, I haven't waited for him to speak again, so as to soothe it. There was already a series of footsteps outside the room. Tony Stark is held in this room. The gangster is not an idiot, in order to prevent the other party from escaping, or playing tricks behind the scenes. In this cell, a camera is also installed. Now through the camera, I naturally saw Lu Yan and Phoenix, two uninvited guests. Although I don't know how the other party got here. But seeing the other party here, the gangsters naturally reacted immediately. At this time, a large number of people came to the cell. In a blink of an eye, 50 or 60 guns were aimed at their heads. Fire. How about it? The Middle Eastern bandits are vigorous. At the moment, I guessed that Lu Yan was a bad person. So after entering the door this time, it was a direct order to fire. Boom boom boom, boom boom boom, accompanied by the voice to the ground. In an instant, countless tongues of fire surged. One bullet after another shot out from the barrel of this gun. Listen to this strong sound. Both Ethan subconsciously hugged their heads and squatted down, trying to reduce their chances of contact with the bullet as much as possible. As for Tony, Yu Guang swept towards Lu Yan, who was aside. Looking at him was as frightened as he was silly, and he stood still and didn't move. Secretly scolded an idiot. I thought that in the next instant, Lu Yan would be swept to death by this random gun. Whoever thought, the next moment, a more shocking scene appeared. That was the countless bullets that originally shot towards Lu Yan. At this moment, after approaching 3 feet away in front of him, it turned out to be the same as being given a fixation method. All froze. One bullet, just hang in the air, stopped in front of Lu Yan. What is going on? Is it magic? The Middle Eastern gangsters' startled roar again and again. For the first time, I felt something was wrong. Some were even timid and planned to retreat. But here Lu Yan, how could it be possible for them to leave so easily? Heavy fruits, anti-gravity display. Raise your hand forward, but just draw it at will. Follow along and listen to quack quack. A series of tearing air sounds kept ringing. The hundreds of bullets just hovering in front of him. Rewind all, and flew away at a faster speed, hitting backwards. All broke into the channel. Bang bang bang, bang bang bang. Subsequently, nearly 100 Middle Eastern criminals were shot and fell to the ground. Zhu Cheng is dead. As for the rest, at this time, he was completely beaten up. Falling to the ground, in Middle Eastern language, panic again, shouting, "The devil!" Countless criminals howled miserably. Watching this scene, Tony, who had been squatting on the ground with a headshot, was naturally dumbfounded. Raising the head of the car this time, there was a strong unbelievable look in his eyes. Is this true? Oh my God, how did this happen? This is the power of magic. Ah, it's just a trick. Lu Yan smiled humbly. You just beckoned and defeated hundreds of bandits with guns. Is this still a trick? Tony looked suspicious, and seriously suspected that Lu Yan was deliberately surging. But never thought. Lu Yan's next sentence was the real heart-piercing crit. Well, they are too weak. I didn't expect that so many people would die if they waved their hands casually. What can I do? I am very helpless. Lu Yan said, the expression on his face really brought some helplessness. Look at him like this. Ethan was silent. As for Tony next to him, he gritted his teeth. He is now, but he hasn't completely become the Iron Man in the future. Playboy and super genius, he is actually the most annoying on weekdays as that others pretend to be forceful in front of him. But right now, looking at Lu Yan's method, he wanted to refute, but he had nothing to say. I could only mutter in my own heart again. A bit sour. What is magic? What's so great? When my strongest weapon is made, it can still kill them. Just thinking about it, Lu Yan had already reached the door, and shouted at him again. How about it, Tony, can't you leave? Don't you really plan to stay here, right? Lu Yan turned to question. Tony Stark returned to his senses, although he was silently complaining about Lu Yan's behavior just now. But right now, he still kept up with his pace. They rushed out of the cave together. This is the military base of these bandits. Among them are heavily guarded. Just after Lu Yan's move, naturally it is impossible to get it done once and for all. In fact, there are more criminals. Hearing the movement, he rushed towards Lu Yan and their side. Their equipment, as well as the number of people, are getting more and more luxurious. Simple assault rifle from the beginning. In the end, even the rocket launcher and the heavy tank came out. I can see Tony Stark's eyelids are jumping wildly. But Lu Yan, his expression is still calm. Heaven testified. It's really not deliberately trying to pretend to be forceful in front of Tony Stark. But now, this battle is compared with the Kree warship that he and Captain Marvel faced not long ago. It's too pediatric. It really makes him unable to think of any importance. At the moment, he is cutting melons and vegetables. No matter how many people come to the other party, it is a trick to directly blow up the other party. And with his actions, there was not even 10 minutes before and after. Just now in Tony Stark and Ethan's mouth, it was still dangerous, and it was completely the lair of criminals in Longtan Tiger's den. Right now, it was directly in ruins. Watching this scene, Tony Stark, who had always asked himself and had seen the big scene, couldn't help but swallowed hard. Not long ago, because of Lu Yan's words, the dissatisfaction that lingered in my heart. It's all gone. How do you say that? Do you think people are pretending to be coercive with you? No, you are wrong, they are really awesome. How does this compare? It's really nothing compared. Thinking of this, Tony couldn't help but speak after thanking Lu Yan and the two of them, and then heard their true identities. I want to know where they came from. At the beginning, when I saw him Lu Yan and Phoenix, he regarded them as strangers invited by his friend Colonel Roddy. But right now, after seeing the follow-up Lu Yan and their means of fighting, he truly understood Lu Yan's terrifying strength at this moment. He realized that he was wrong. This level of power, whether it is really magician or mutant. None of his friends, Colonel Roddy, can command any more. No, to be precise, it is unlikely that the military wants to command him to come and rescue himself. After all, the guy in front of him looked as sloppy as himself. It's not like someone from the system. Tony thought so. Looking at Lu Yan's gaze, there is also a scrutiny. Lu Yan was stunned when he heard the news. Looking back at Tony's gaze, he laughed again. I think this guy is as smart as ever. After a pause, he didn't conceal his true identity. Instead, he pointed at Tony Stark in front of him, truthfully. SHIELD over there, ask me to save you. SHIELD. Yes, it's the special organization that your father co-founded, the full name of the National Security Defense and Security Bureau. Don't tell me, you have no impression of this organization. Lu Yan replied. So you are from SHIELD. Tony heard the news, but his face instantly became weird. He naturally knows the origin of SHIELD. But at the moment, he still has a lot of resistance to SHIELD. But at this moment Lu Yan didn't care what he thought. Let Chin's spirit power, glanced over the spot. After confirming that no one is alive. Then he stretched out his hand, like an eagle catching a chicken. A handful of them held Ethan's shoulders. Opening the portal instantly, it was considered that they left the military base with them. Appeared on a bustling street. This is. Tony Duck followed Lu Yan. At this time, the figure fell to the ground again. Looking at the familiar streets on all sides. The expression on the face is both delightful and unbelievable. He also waited until Lu Yan was here and really spoke to him. This is after New York. Tony, who had returned to his homeland, became excited. With Ethan next to him, there was another exciting hug. I originally thought that Lu Yan, who was entrusted by people today, would take what SHIELD agent they saw with them. No one thought of it. The next moment, the two went through the portal and returned to the Middle East. Instead, they left the two of them on the streets of New York and fended for themselves. Watching this scene, Tony Stark was completely blinded. As for this moment, at SHIELD headquarters, Nick Fury is anxiously waiting for news. After knowing this, almost collapsed. What a joke is this? These two guys, is it really so casual to save people? Throw people back casually and leave. Then continue to travel back to the Middle East. Do you want to be so headstrong? Although this is just a routine task. But Tony Stark, after all, he is also a super rich man, after his deceased. And it's the largest arms dealer in the world right now. Is this little face not for others? Nick Fury thought so. It's really helpless this time. After receiving the location information sent back by Lu Yan, only for the first time, let Phil Coulson personally come forward and send a special car to take the Iron Man, who is no different from a homeless man on Hell's Kitchen Street in New York, back to headquarters. After a good hospitality, this sent him back to his Stark company. Just after returning, Stark announced to the outside world that Stark Industries is preparing to transform. Give up the most profitable and violent military industry. As soon as this topic came out, it naturally caused an uproar in the outside world instantly. Countless people began to talk about it. Nick Fury, who had just disappeared for a few days, also had to secretly help Tony Stark's reckless behavior and wiped his ass. The whole of New York, no, it should be said that the United States, now the headlines of the news are all this. Many people think that Tony, the super rich, went to the Middle East and got 10 heads. However, this does not affect Lu Yan's and Phoenix's leisurely vacation life in the Middle East. What Nick Fury said before is really right. Lu Yan at the moment really came to save people by the way. And by the way, to be honest, a large part of it is based on the face of rewards given by the system. Otherwise, it's Lu Yan's temperament. I won't come here for no reason and do this. And now that all the tasks have been completed, the next step is to travel around the mountains and play the sinking water. Take Phoenix and ride a camel in the desert. Go to Dubai to see the Petronas Twin Towers. Go to the Pyramids country again to see the pyramids that were not destroyed by him in Apocalypse in the last battle, and the capital that has been restored. This way down, stop and go, and play for a full week. Only then came back from the Middle East. And right now, just came back. He was picked up by Tony Stark's special car. Although Tony looks a little arrogant, he is indeed a rare good person when he comes into contact with him. Even if he has returned to New York right now, he is safe. But not because of that, he forgot his lifesaver Lu Yan. So now, after knowing that Lu Yan is back, I sent someone over to pick him up as soon as possible. I would like to invite him to a meal, and then I would like to thank him in person. Lu Yan naturally nodded to this, and agreed. After getting in the car, Tony's personal assistant, Pepper, was very familiar with playing the piano and Gray chatted next to him. As for Lu Yan, he fell into a sleepy state in the car. It's definitely, this false sleep state is just a false sleep that outsiders mistakenly think. The real Lu Yan. Taking advantage of this juncture, I entered the system space again and inquired about the distribution of related rewards. At this time, it was just entering it. Just listen to beep. In my head, a system prompt sounded. Ding. Congratulations to the host, for successfully completing the rescue work for Tony Stark, and successfully eliminating the Middle Eastern bandits. The template character, Rise, has increased the control to 42.7%. Beep. Character template, reaching the key value. Awakening comes from the new skill of Wandering Magician Rise Rune Imprisonment. Skill description. Immediately slow an enemy by 35% for 1.5 seconds, and cause 80 100ths, 120 140ths, 160 plus 0.6 AP plus 4% extra mana magic damage. This is the reward given by the previous eradication of Middle Eastern bandits. Because the original level of the opponent is average, the increase in rewards is naturally not large. This was expected by Lu Yan. It's just that what really surprised him. This time, Awakening even got a new skill by accident. This is indeed beyond Lu Yan's expectations. But he was not too happy about it. After all, the character template Rise, for him now, the importance has been greatly reduced. What's more, the real focus of his attention right now is not here. Thinking so, Lu Yan waved his hand and directly closed the system panel where the personal template was located. There is no plan to test new skills at all. Instead, he turned his head and opened the system space directly. And this time, looking at the 5 lying quietly in the storage space of the system. Straight Up finally showed a satisfied smile. This trip to rescue Tony Stark gave the God-level reward Zhu Yan Dan finally distributed. I don't know what happened to the system this time. Obviously, the task was completed 7 days ago. Why is it delayed until now to release the medicine? It's really speechless. Lu Yan thought so. But I also know that this time I shouldn't be entangled in such trivial matters. After thinking about it again, at this moment, I directly took the Zuyan pill out of my arms again. Handed over to Phoenix's hands. Looking at her, I couldn't wait, and said again. Quickly, Chin, eat this stuff and have a look. Eat it, you say this. Jin Gray had a lively chat with Pepper. Suddenly Lu Yan was planning to put a pill into his hand, and the whole person was naturally taken aback. Listen to him again. Reaching out and picking up the Zonyan pill given by Lu Yan, he couldn't help but ask again. What is this, Lu Yan? Candy. What kind of candy? This is CGAE, a gift I specially prepared for you. The panacea. After eating, it will keep people young forever. Eternal youth. Chin Gray was stunned again. When the suspicious little Pepper next to him heard the news, he couldn't help but and laughed again. Obviously, for her, an academic elite who has received orthodox science education since she was a child. What is eternal youth? What a panacea, it sounds too ridiculous. So right now, it was a subconscious laugh. Just now, after laughing, little Chilly returned to his senses, but regretted it a little. Then I remembered what Tony Stark had said to herself before she came. I also thought that I was not receiving someone else at this time. It's a couple who knows magic. If what Tony said before was true, all things that cannot be explained by science for the time being, it is reasonable to put them on them. For example, Zuyan Dan. Thinking so, little Chilly hurriedly lowered his head and apologized again. I'm really sorry, Mr. Liu, I didn't mean that. However, I haven't finished talking about this, but it has been interrupted by Lu Yan waved his hand. To be honest, Lu Yan suddenly laughed at Xiao Chili. I still feel a little unhappy. But he also knew that the other party's fault was completely unintentional. So right now, I didn't mean to blame the other party. Instead, she opened her eyes and asked her to keep her eyes open and wait and see. He was obviously prepared to use actual actions to prove to her that what he said was true. Phoenix naturally understood the meaning of his own man. Seeing this, he was very solemn, so he stuffed it into his mouth and swallowed it down. Zhu Yan Dan enters the abdomen. Phoenix instantly felt that there was a warm current, and her abdomen gushed out, changing her limbs. That is a completely different energy from Phoenix Force. It is like the spring breeze and rain, without any irritability. On the contrary, it is full of gentleness, flowing through every corner of Phoenix's body at this time. Let her just feel comfortable all over. The pore on the whole body's epidermis couldn't help but open. After a long time, I opened my eyes again. I even discovered that my already fair skin started to glow with jade quality at this time. Ah, Lu Yan, what is going on? Watching this scene, Chin Gray is really a bit silly. Although I have just listened to Lu Yan's introduction, I talked about the magical effect of this Zonyan pill. However, she really didn't expect this effect to be so good. This change is too big. She took out her phone and took it as a mirror. I feel more than 10 years younger. The skin condition now is much better than what I was 10 years ago. It can be said to be full of collagen. Beauty is better than ever. And little Pepper was watching this scene from the side. The small mouth was completely opened. Shape. It was not until this time that I realized how precious the gift Lu Yan said was. This is the elixir that can make people youthful forever. If the effect is really as good as Lu Yan just introduced. The value of the pill just now is really not something that can be measured with simple money. Little Pepper can be said to know this well. But even so, after really seeing the terrifying recovery effect of this Zonyan pill, she couldn't help but shed a few minutes of expectation on her face, and asked Lu Yan several people in front of her, and said, Mr. Liu, do you have any more of the Yan Yan Dan? I thought. Little Pepper hesitated to speak but stopped. Lu Yan looked at her like this, how could he not understand what the other party meant? Anyway, he still has 4 pills in his hand, which are also stored. Looking at the conversation between Little Pepper and Phoenix just now, it was a real match. In his impression, he really rarely sees any female friends and friends in Phoenix. So right now, holding this idea. One more flick, then it's utterly straightforward. It really flicked a Zonyan Dan into the hands of this Little Pepper. Ah, Mr. Liu, did you really give it to me? Little Pepper reached out and took it, looking at his hand, the magical pill with a faint star on the light. At this time, both were pleasantly surprised, but also very unbelievable. Obviously, he didn't expect that Lu Yan's side, it was so easy today, that he would hand the pill into his own hands. After returning to his senses, he followed and shook his head again. No way, sir, this gift is too expensive, I can't accept it. Little Pepper looked solemn. Seeing this, Lu Yan laughed again and said, okay, let you hold it and hold it, if there is anything you can't collect. I have all the things I gave out here, why is there any reason to take it back? But, it's nothing good. It's rare that you and Chin are so fond of you. This should be a meeting gift for you. Chin, are you right? Lu Yan spoke faintly, said so, suddenly turned his head, and asked Chin again. Seeing this, Chin laughed immediately. Taking the initiative to step forward, he took up Little Chili's hand and said again. Yeah, it's okay, Little Pepper, since it's given to you, then you can eat it, this kind of thing, in our place, it is a waste if it is too much. Too much, is it a waste? Waste, although I know, the other party said so, after all, it is to comfort myself. But I really heard the two people in front of me, saying that it would be a waste to eat too much. Little Chili was still speechless for a while, and almost spurted out a mouthful of old blood. Listen, is this human? This is a pill that can keep people youthful forever. Even if you don't eat it, you can sell it at a sky-high price. Do you want to be so casual? Although I complained about the attitude of Lu Yan in front of him. But looking at them like this, Little Pepper finally understood what they wanted. After Zhang nodded his head, he finally stopped being hypocritical. After thanking you again, I couldn't wait to swallow this Zonyan pill into my stomach. At this moment, his eyes narrowed slightly. It is clear. I also began to look forward to it, after I swallowed this Zonyan pill. The scene that became more youthful and beautiful. But at this moment, after the pill enters the abdomen, the unexpected situation appeared to her. That is right now, with the warm current that this Zuyan pill melts, flowing through the limbs of her body. On her body surface, a sticky black substance started pouring out. And accompanied by the gushing out of this substance, an unspeakable stench suddenly appeared on the scene. Accompanied by this taste, everyone present was naturally taken aback. At first, I didn't understand what happened. Following the low roar made a terrible cry. Lu Yan just remembered now. There is a line of supplementary small characters on this Zuyandan introduction. It is this pill that I said above, and it also has the effect of washing the essence and cutting the marrow. Although Lu Yan saw this line of fine print at the time, to be honest, he didn't pay too much attention to it. Did not specifically remind the Little Pepper in front of him. After all, judging from the effect of Phoenix just taking it, this effect of washing the essence and cutting the marrow should not be very obvious. But he was a little bit thinking about definitely, so he ignored a very important thing. That is Phoenix at this time, and has completely mastered Phoenix Force. Physical strength has long been different from ordinary people. Therefore, for her to cleanse the essence, it is normal for her to see no major changes. But Phoenix is like this, but it doesn't mean that others are also like this. At the moment, Little Chili is the best example. As an ordinary person, even if the pepper is usually maintained carefully, some impurities and residues lurking in one's own body can't be removed. So these impurities are being forced out by the medicinal power of Zuyan pill. This is really a good thing. But right now, on this occasion, it is a bit too embarrassing to happen. Although Lu Yan and Phoenix saw this time, they didn't say much. But Xiao Chili felt the changes in his body, but his face turned red immediately. After an exclamation, this is to bow his head, I can't wait to find a seam to get in. It was extremely shy. Fortunately, at this moment, the car was driving and finally reached the Iron Man mansion. Therefore, the awkward atmosphere of the carriage did not last long. As soon as the car stopped, Chili quickly rushed out of the door and ran towards the bathroom of the guest room on the Iron Man side. Tony heard someone coming back, then went out, with a big smile on his face, and he was ready to meet him personally. As soon as he fell, he saw Little Pepper hurriedly passing by. And still blushing. Naturally, there was a bit more doubt on his face. Turning his head again, looking to the back of Phoenix, who was equally embarrassed, and Lu Yan, he couldn't help but speak, and then asked, "What is happening? Little chili is so good. How did it become this? Looks like." When Lu Yan heard the news, he lowered his head and coughed a little embarrassingly. But at the moment there is no plan to hide it. Follow along with what happened in the car. I also told it. Facing Tony frankly, saying that he was a little ill-conceived. Tony heard that it is naturally impossible to blame Lu Yan for such a trivial matter. In fact, after Tony heard the news, he laughed again. I found it very interesting to keep the sample of the little pepper just now. Turning to look at Lu Yan again. He was also very interested, and asked about the effect of the Zonyan pill in his mouth. Lu Yan smiled mysteriously at this, and said, "What is the effect? Don't you know when your assistant little pepper comes out of the room and takes a shower?" Tony thought about it, and felt that it was indeed true. So I won't just continue on this topic anymore. In turn, they waved enthusiastically. Invite the two to sit down in the mansion. Going to talk in detail slowly. After entering the house, with some ostentatious openings, Tony introduced to Lu Yan and Phoenix in front of him the high-intelligence devices in his home. Including JARVIS or something. There is also the Iron Man battlesuit in production. Just looking at Lu Yan's side, I lacked interest. I didn't seem to be very interested in these things. Only then took the two of them back to the living room of the room and sat down. On the big sofa, after Tony took a seat, his face was inevitably sad. Seeing this, Lu Yan finally couldn't hold back from the side, and broke the silence in the court by opening his mouth. I asked the guy Tony Stark, it was so good, he sent his group of people to the house for dinner, what is it for? They all say that nothing is going to go to the Palace of Three Treasures. Although you know in Lu Yan's heart, Tony Stark, 013, is not the kind of utilitarian person. L-F equals. But if you want to come to each other, it should not be possible to invite them to dinner at home for no reason. In addition, the other party's expression of hesitation at the moment. Lu Yan thought for a while, and finally decided, simply picking up the words. Ask the other party what his true purpose is, Samir. This question, the answer he got, was similar to what he had expected. On Tony's side, there is indeed something to consult him. Not for anything else, but the steel device on his chest. Those who have seen Iron Man should be clear. In the beginning, Tony Stark installed this steel device, not to be cool, or to store some energy in his body. But it is purely to pull the shrapnel in one's own body, so as not to travel all over the body. In the Middle East, the medical condition is poor, and I love it, and I have to save my life. Although in the follow-up, he invented the arc reactor by virtue of his super high IQ, and successfully continued his life. But where is the first generation of arc reactor as convenient and smart as the latter? It also contains elements that are very lethal to the human body. Although right now, it will not have any big impact on helping Tony's body for the time being. But as a top genius in science, Tony Stark knew in his heart that this thing is like a countdown to death god, and one day it will completely take his life. So Tony at this moment is also planning ahead. Only then will Lu Yan come to discuss it. Not for anything else, just want to ask him if he has a way. Help yourself. Lift this deadly crisis. This is the only way he wants to come. After all, when the scientific world is at a loss for this, it seems that there is only that kind of magical magic. Only in this way can I point out a way out for myself in the confusion and darkness of the future. Concerned about his illness, Tony Stark is completely frank and has nothing to hide. And I heard Tony say so. Lu Yan lowered his head here, but fell into silence again. At this time, I also started to have a headache. Don't get me wrong, Lu Yan's headache right now is not unwilling to help Tony. For Tony, such a real Superman with the heart of steel. He still respects him personally. Generally speaking, Lu Yan would not refuse to help him. But what makes him feel the most headache at the moment is that his means to help the other party seem to be really pitiful. Although the crazy lottery of the heavens and the world before, he also got a lot of good things here. But really speaking, most of them are used in combat. It is used for treatment, but it is very pitiful. Really speaking, it seems that there are only fairy beans in the Dragon Ball world, which can be regarded as this kind of miracle medicine. But can that thing heal the injury of the poisonous metal that contains the element in the body? Obviously it is impossible. Follow the design inside Dragon Ball. It seems that this thing can only treat trauma, but it has little effect on the internal organs. Otherwise, in Dragon Ball, Wukong would not almost die of cancer. If it weren't for Trunks to travel through the future, he would come to deliver medicine. It is estimated that there will not be any Dragon Ball GT, there will be plots such as the Whole King. Thinking like this, after a long silence, Liu Yan raised his head again. Looking at Tony, he could only shook his head with some regret, and said, "Sorry, this kind of injury, even me, can't be reversed. Can't turn it around." Tony heard the news, a look of sadness flashed across his eyes. "Although it is clear in my mind, this is a high probability event. But I really heard Liu Yan say so." Still, he couldn't avoid a touch of sadness passing through his eyes. But Tony is not the kind of sorrowful person after all. After a moment of depression, he raised his eyes again, but took the initiative to smile at Liu Yan and the others, saying, "It's okay, anyway, this element can't help me for the time being. I can live for a day, it's a day. Come, let us toast today," Tony said, pouring himself a glass of champagne. "After toasting, you have to drink with everyone." And watching him do it, Liu Yan thought for a while, and felt that he still had to show this confused person a clear way. So he spoiled it again, and said to him, "Actually, there is really no way. I have another way, which should be able to help you." "Huh, what method? You can talk about it. On the Earth, I can think of ways, basically I think about it." When Iron Man heard Liu Yan say this, he immediately became interested again. Liu Yan smiled again at this. "The Earth's methods have been thought of, and there is really no way. You can't go to the sky, think about it again." Liu Yan stretched out his hand and pointed to the sky. Tony was stunned, but his expression immediately became strange again. "No, you want me to explore space. The universe is so big, I'm worried that if I haven't found alternative elements and solutions, I will die first," Tony said, with a helpless expression on his face. Liu Yan smiled more happily when he saw this, said, "It's not about letting you go to the space to find it by yourself, but there are ready-made space objects, right on the Earth. I think you can use it for research and research." "Oh, there is such a thing, what is it?" Tony asked. Liu Yan burst out the name directly and said, "Tesseract. Once, it was still in my hands, but now, it's not there anymore. It was taken away by the guy Nick Fury. If you are interested in this, you can go to S.H.I.E.L.D. and ask him to borrow relevant materials. We in China have an old saying that the stones of other mountains can be used for jade. Doing more research on alien devices may help you find new breakthroughs." Quote. Liu Yan smiled. When Tony heard the news, he also nodded solemnly. Silently remembered the news in his heart. "I also feel that I have time to take the initiative to contact S.H.I.E.L.D. Thinking like this, he raised his eyes again, originally intending to ask Liu Yan in front of him for a few more relevant details. However, that is the point of view. The door of the guest room behind him heard the soft noise of yesterday. The little pepper that has been washed is finally covered with wet blonde hair. Appeared in the field again. Although it was before she appeared. Liu Yuan had already prepared for it a long time ago. Knowing that this little pepper, after swallowing Zuyuan, the appearance of the whole person will have an unprecedented change. But to be honest, wait until you see what's happening with Chili. He still couldn't help being stunned. In the depths of the eyes, there was also a stunning look in the depths of the eyes. Although the original little pepper was just a beauty, it was because of working behind Tony Stark, an unreliable boss for a long time. Staying up late and working overtime is inevitable. There are some small freckles on the face, and it looks a bit old, which is normal. But right now, after the baptism of this Zuyuan, and after washing the muscles and marrow. But it showed a completely different state. At this time, the freckles on the face not only disappeared completely. The skin on the body is completely reborn and becomes extremely smooth. If it was said that Phoenix before, after taking this medicine, the skin on his body became like jade, white and flawless. At the moment, after taking the pepper, the color of the skin becomes extremely healthy. Although it is smooth, it is not completely white, on the contrary, it has a bit of bronze. It looks like a human body sculpture in ancient Rome, full of classical beauty, coupled with her height that is not low. So when I stepped out at this moment, I just walked a few steps at random, which actually gave people the feeling of a Victoria's Secret supermodel walking on the show. In fact, he took control of the audience instantly and attracted everyone's attention. Even with Phoenix, I couldn't help covering my mouth, and praised it from the bottom of my heart. It's so beautiful. They are all like this. Tony Stark next to him was even more dumbfounded when he looked at him without any promise. After a while, he returned to his senses, and couldn't help but be surprised. Roar got up and said again, "Oh my God, little Chili, are you going for a plastic surgery? Why do you suddenly become so beautiful?" Listen to the surprise on his side. Roar. Little Chili's face turned red involuntarily, and he cast a blank glance at his own Playboy boss. He didn't directly answer his words. Instead, he turned his head and looked at Luyan and Phoenix next to him. "Thank you," very solemnly towards the two. "Luyan, thank you, really, thank you. This Zhu Yan Dan is indeed a great favor to me, and I will repay you one day." "It doesn't have to be like that. Haven't I told you all about it before? There are so many medicinal pills that it would be a waste to put it here." Luyan smiled and waved his hand. "You don't have to be so polite to signal to Little Pepper." On his side, the voice hasn't landed yet. Next to Tony Shi, Stark took the opportunity and said solemnly, "How can it be done? Don't you have an old saying in Washaw called sending goose feathers for thousands of miles? The gift is light and affectionate. What's more, you are not sending goose feathers at the moment, but precious treasures. How can we not return the gift? Reason, let me say, it's better to do this. I don't have anything else for you. How about transferring some shares of Stark to you? Not much. Give you a 1%, 2% joy. What are you talking about? Give Luyan their shares in Stark. That's your thing. How can it be used to thank me?" Little Chili started to roar, looking at Tony's eyes next to him, a little puzzled. But Tony didn't care about it. He said again, "What yours, mine, it's all the same. It's still so clear between us. Tony, you guy." Upon hearing Tony Stark's words, Chili's complexion instantly turned red again. And looking at the look of both of them frowning, Luyan laughed again. Only then did it reflect what had happened. My heart said that Tony Stark was quick enough to start. Worthy of being a playboy for so many years. It's only been a few days since I came back. Did you really get the Little Pepper? Luyan thought, looking at the two of them with ambiguous eyes. Definitely, it's just a blessing. But unlike the people in Tony's company, they want Sugar Daddy for defamation of any chili peppers. Because he knew very well in his heart that Little Pepper and Tony were really in love. Looking at the two of them in this way, there is still a little sweet look. After thinking about Tony again, the story of Avengers Alliance IV. Luyan, who has always been salted fish, couldn't help but feel some impulses in his heart at this moment. I feel that since my trip to the Marvel world, so many things have changed. It doesn't hurt to change a little bit more. For example, stop Tony's death. Let him really spend his old age with his daughter and Little Pepper. Really love her, 3,000 times and so on. Thinking of this, I think of Iron Man unfinished follow-up plot. Luyan couldn't help but speak, and then asked Luyan in front of him, saying, "Tony, I heard that after you came back this time, you have completely changed your company's strategy and no longer get involved in the military industry. Instead, you plan to develop in environmental protection fields such as new energy." Tony Stark, who was still lacking in interest, heard Luyan questioning business. The whole person was immediately energetic. Followed Jung nodded. There was no hesitation at all, but with some pride, he said again. "Yes, the military industry, as I saw it, is a real industry that kills people without blinking. Basically every penny earned has human lives behind it, and there are blood and tears behind it. I am uneasy about making money with this. In comparison, I think the new energy industry is the future. And let's talk about it. I feel that the profit of the new energy industry is not low. The future development prospects may be greater than military industry. Quote, trust me, in a few years, I will be able to take Stark to new glory." Tony spoke excitedly. Luyan laughed when he heard what he said. The corners of his mouth were a little playful and said, "Really, Your thoughts are a bit advanced, but I heard that in your company, it seems that there are not a few people who oppose this strategy, right? Lu Yan's words made Tony's smile a little stiff. But after a moment, I couldn't help but laugh again, saying, "Don't pay attention to them, they are all short-sighted people. It's a little troublesome now, but you can rest assured that this Stark company is mine after all, and their decision will not play a major role." Seeing his confident look, Lu Yan shook his head slightly. Only then did he understand why in the end of Iron Man, he almost suffered a big loss in the opponent's hands. Everyone was almost killed by the other party. Still too arrogant. But think about it. After all, the current Iron Man is still immature. It is far from complete, the complete transformation from a playboy to a heart of steel. It is still impossible to really consider the overall situation and think thoroughly like the latter. Thinking so, he spoke, but he couldn't help but reminded Tony again. There are some things that need to be considered and perfected. Don't think definitely, don't underestimate the power of any one person. Have you forgotten the lesson of this Middle East incident? You know, dogs that bite, but never bark. Lu Yan clicked on the side and made a couple of sentences. How smart Tony is. Hearing this, I immediately felt something was wrong. The excitement on his face disappeared immediately. The eyebrows are inevitably more solemn. Speaking towards him, he asked again, said, "Good point, Lu Yan, why are you telling me this? Is it possible you know some inside information about our group?" Lu Yan raised his brows when he heard the news. Obviously, I never expected Tony Stark this guy's head would turn so fast. Suddenly guessed the truth of the matter. Then came back to his senses. Facing the other side's suspicious and expectant gaze. Hesitation for a while. In the end, he chose to tell the truth and nodded his head to admit the matter. However, this black pot was thrown by him to S.H.I.E.L.D. Using S.H.I.E.L.D. as the excuse, he said again. The people at S.H.I.E.L.D. told me. In fact, there is nothing else, just be careful with Obadiah Stein. He seems to be a little restless lately, as if he has secret contact with some terrorists. Obadiah Stein, terrorist, that's the veteran of our company. Is there any misunderstanding here? Tony Stark heard Lu Yan say this, but he didn't have the first time to believe what he said. At this moment, instead, he opened his mouth, and asked him again with anxiety. As for Lu Yan, he shrugged his shoulders at this time, and said with a daze. I don't know, I just heard Nick Fury mention this news. What exactly does that guy do? You have to judge by yourself. What Lu Yan said like this was to throw himself a clean one. Tony Stark watched his reaction. There was a burst of uncertainty in his eyes. Obviously knowing Lu Yan's words at this moment, there is a great probability that he is lying. However, after repeated hesitation at the moment, I still have no choice to continue to inquire. Instead, he nodded, just lightly exposed the matter. Did not go further. Obviously, I also feel that Lu Yan is impeded by his identity, and there is something unspeakable. Looking at his reaction, instead of feeling disappointed, Lu Yan nodded with satisfaction. Otherwise, talking with smart people is easy. This is what he just mentioned a little bit. The other party understood what he meant. This feeling is still very cool. After I want to have myself, I think that the story of Iron Man has been changed by myself. Obadiah Stan, there shouldn't be any trouble. Lu Yan thought so, and his heart felt a lot easier in an instant. Regarding this kind of villain, leave it to Iron Man to solve the matter by himself. He didn't feel the slightest guilt in his heart. After all, the last opponent who fought and killed him in a true sense was Dormammu, the Dark Lord. Let him go to fight against Obadiah Stan now, isn't that lowering his identity? Give this kind of pendant to Iron Man, let's go experience it. I can't do everything about superhero. In that case, would you still be a salted fish? Salted fish, naturally, you have to leave the trouble to others. Lu Yan thought so, but he was relieved to be the shopkeeper. After reminding Iron Man, he followed the trend and accompanied Iron Man. Went to see the steel battle suit he was still building. A few people had a party together in the evening. I slept until noon the next day, and then the dangling chin returned to his home in Hell's Kitchen. The two of them are walking freely here. I thought it was dangerous, I have been strangled in the cradle. But I don't know that right now, it is at the same time when several people are talking. Obadiah Stine was sitting in a secret base on the outskirts of New York. At the moment, I was looking at the items delivered from the base in the Middle East. The complexion was gloomy, almost dripping. I kept scolding idiots in my mouth. The reason for the resentment right now is naturally not because they kidnapped Tony Stark, his boss. The actual situation is quite the opposite. Obadiah Stine is the most angry right now, but this is it. Angry at the other party, he didn't kill Tony Stark immediately. Instead, he was released again. Yes, the real behind-the-scenes agent of the whole incident is not the Middle Eastern gangster, but him, Obadiah Stane. He planned everything carefully, even ready to go. What was waiting was the news of the killing of Tony from the side of the Middle Eastern gangsters. He took advantage of the trend and took the position of head of the board of directors in one fell swoop. Inherit the entire Stark company. Become the richest person in the world in January. But who would have thought that the Middle Eastern bandits, after receiving his money, were so lustful that they did not kill Tony Stark in the first place, but instead expected him to create weapons of mass destruction for themselves. Instead, it gave Tony a chance to escape. As a result, all of his plans fell through. It's ruined my plan for many years. Think about who you will do for such a major event. Who can feel not angry? Obadiah Stine's reaction is actually already calculated. If you change to someone else. Right now I am afraid that I am really angry and going mad. But even so, looking at his expression right now, the next man behind him still felt a great pressure. One by one chilled. After a long while, his confidant walked over with courage and calmed down. Boss, look ahead. Although we did not succeed in killing Tony's side at this time, we did not reveal our identity. And Tony came back this time, and suddenly his head was convulsed. He wanted to close all military business and deal with the entire Stark group. Transformation has caused dissatisfaction among many people on the board of directors. I think this is another opportunity for us. We can make good use of it. Use? What can you use? Don't you know, Tony is absolutely controlling in the company. Let's even join the other owners of the board. It is impossible to threaten Tony Stark's position as the chairman of the company. You idiot. Obadiah Stine couldn't help cursing when he heard the news. Shin said that if you deal with Tony Stark, it is as simple as uniting the other people on the board of directors to gather people's hearts. Why is he so troublesome? What Middle Eastern thugs are he looking for? And heard him say so. The confidant who just came up to comfort him also knew that he had said something wrong. At this time, the whole person also looked a little flustered inexplicably. After speaking, he stubbornly asked again, said, "Then what shall we do? Is it true that we have to give up like this and stay on the ground again?" Sting. I've been cheating for so long, I'm fed up with Tony, that dude. Obadiah Stane spat bitterly. But the boss, the confidant still wants to persuade. But it was already caught by Obadiah Stine. Good, immediately, he said, it's nothing, good, but I have made up my mind. Don't worry, this time Tony must be completely killed. Obadiah Stane gritted his teeth. He said this, then turned his head, and said again to the confidant in front of him. Go, transfer me a group of scientific researchers from the company secretly. I want to rush to make a batch of mechas. Machine, mecha, yes, the mecha designed by Tony Stark himself. Obadiah Stane said here, lowered his head and looked in front of him, the design drawings found from the nest of the Middle Eastern thugs. The corner of his mouth finally raised a smile. After years of working together, he naturally had vaguely guessed Tony's inner plan at the time. It is estimated that this guy, if there is no one to rescue him, will secretly make this mecha escape to life. Really interesting. He intended to close all the weapons departments of the company. So far, the company's strongest weapon plant has been manufactured. This should be said to be a mockery. As fate trick people. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.